Chapter 6:27. Thank you, God, for your blessings. Batu is extremely grateful. Batu kowtowed again. His strength was much more terrifying than before, even causing a small earthquake. If it were not for the green leaf water lotus gathering spiritual energy and tempering it day and night in this area of Lin Yuan's lair, many creatures would have been unlucky because of this. Immediately, Lin Yuan's mind moved, and a golden light descended from the sky, directly enveloping Batu, whose muscles were constantly bulging and his body was constantly growing. A thought flashed through his mind, and the power of incense was stirred again. The power of incense, which was originally more than 40,000, directly dropped by 1 digit to 9,973 before it ended. Boom! An incomparably ferocious aura once again spread out in all directions. This time, there was no earth-shaking phenomenon. With just a light sweep of the aura, hundreds of 300-meter-tall giant trees collapsed and scattered in all directions. A large number of beasts and birds that couldn't escape in time were crushed into fine powder. Even Lin Yuan could feel a strong sense of threat when facing the current Batu, as if this ferocious beast were to go berserk, even he might be directly torn to pieces. With 40,000 incense power, the power of the true dragon's son could be said to be terrifying. Lin Yuan, who had always been known to be invincible among those of the same level, actually felt that he wasn't a match for a level 3 intelligence perception demonic beast when he was only a level 8 mountain lord. Ding! Congratulations, host, for completing the mission Demonic Beast's Oath. You have received the eternal loyalty of the demonic beast Batu. Ding! Congratulations, host, Batu's loyalty is permanently fixed at full value. Ding! This creature's loyalty to host has reached full level. Host can confer it as a subordinate god and receive the power of a subordinate god. This creature will receive a large amount of benefits when engaging in activities in the domain of divine authority. The 2 consecutive system notifications awakened Lin Yuan from his shock, and what followed next was uncontrollable ecstasy. A monster. A true monster. Yet, he had an unwavering loyalty to him. Batu, from now on, you are the god of war and conquest in the Northern Frontier god system, the first subordinate god under my command. After receiving the system notification, Lin Yuan didn't hesitate to confer it as one of his subordinate gods, and said in a deep voice, "You can develop your own believers and clan on your own. I will let Li Zhong announce your new identity, one of the 36 celestial gods of the Northern Frontier, War God Batu." "Thank you, Divine King, for your gift." Batu kowtowed for the 3rd time, and his tone became more humble and respectful. As a subordinate god conferred by Lin Yuan through the system, Batu didn't need to explore the so-called path of God, but was directly instilled with a large amount of experience and relevant knowledge by the system. In addition, at the moment, Batu had just entered intelligence, and his nature had yet to mature, but he was already full of divinity. As the divine king of the Northern Frontier god system, Lin Yuan didn't lose this divine right when he distributed his divine right to the subordinate gods under him. It was equivalent to the operation of a group leader setting up an administrator, giving them absolute management rights under him. However, Lin Yuan still had the ability to use this divine right or deprive others of their divine right at any time. This privilege would continue until Lin Yuan fell and the position of divine king was empty. Only then would the subordinate gods under him be qualified to compete and fight for the position of divine king. Although Batu, who had been conferred as a subordinate god, wouldn't continue to provide incense power to Lin Yuan like a fanatic believer, not all gods would choose to walk the path of ancient gods like Lin Yuan. Batu, who had been instilled with experience by the system, was more inclined to cultivate believers and harvest incense, and 1/3 of all the profits that belonged to Batu would be offered to Lin Yuan, the divine king. From a small fixed income to a large amount of long-term investment, it was similar to the difference between Yu Bao and a wealth management fund. Of course, the divine king didn't have absolute control over his subordinate gods. When another powerful god system appeared, his subordinate gods might give up their divine position and divine right in the northern frontier god system and lead their believers to defect to the other god system. This kind of behavior would often cause a war between the two powerful god systems. However, judging from the structure of the Tianwu continent, there was obviously no second god system other than Lin Yuan. Those Yin gods whose physical bodies had perished and who continued to live by absorbing incense power were obviously not on the same level as gods like Lin Yuan and Badu, who had physical bodies. I will leave the northern frontier for a period of time. You will be in charge of the northern frontier prince's mansion. Once something happens that Li Zhong can't solve, you will personally appear to solve it. However, you must remember, no matter what, do not leave the northern frontier territory. If there are really troublesome opponents, temporarily stop them in a stalemate with the goal of stopping losses. Wait for me to come back and deal with them. When Batu's eyes regained clarity, Lin Yuan said in a low voice, War god Batu obeys the divine king's orders. Batu knelt on one knee and reached out his hand to hit his chest heavily. About an hour later, after contacting Li Zhong through the puppet, Batu's new identity was announced to the entire northern frontier. After most of the spies lurking in the northern frontier sent the news back to their factions, what they received in return was a contemptuous smile from the higher-ups. They felt that Lin Yuan seemed to have gone crazy. He had only been conferred the title of a god of the northern frontier by the Shenwu dynasty, which was about to perish, and he felt that he was really a godlike existence. Conferring the title of a god? How much change could a title bring? If others called you a god, would you really be a god? However, regarding Batu's new identity, the eyes of many ambitious people in the northern frontier lit up. In particular, those demon beasts and cultivators who had rushed to Lin Yuan's side under the banner of the ancient demon court, such as Kagura, began to make their own plans. Although Lin Yuan did not confer the title of a god to other gods, Batu was only one of the 36 heavenly dipper gods. In other words, there were at least 35 empty spots among Lin Yuan's god subordinate. If he could obtain one of them, how glorious would it be when the demon court recovered in the future? Some were envious, some coveted, some sneered. All of these had nothing to do with Lin Yuan, because at this moment, Lin Yuan had quietly embarked on a new journey. His main body resided in a beast pouch made by the Ministry of Works and hung on the puppet's waist, while his divine sense was attached to the puppet's body. He rowed a small boat south along the Wei River. Through the makeup technology developed by the Ministry of Works, the puppet's skin color was covered by paint. It was no longer as lifeless as before. After changing into a black robe without any complicated patterns and bringing enough dry food, water, and a few spare black robes, Lin Yuan left the northern frontier under Li Zhong's gaze. Of course, he did not travel alone, because the puppet had brought 2 beast pouches with it. The other one contained the blood descendant of the Dragon King of the West Sea Dragon Palace, Ao Qian. However, after being put into the beast pouch, she was cut off from the outside world, so there was no need to chat to relieve boredom. Chapter 6:28. The young man's sword had not been properly equipped, and he was already in Jianghu. This description of Lin Yuan's trip was obviously not appropriate. Lin Yuan did not see any Jianghu, only a purgatory on earth. Due to the internal strife of the Shenwu dynasty, and the sky demon's continued torment, there was almost no life to be found along the Wei River. The bustling docks, towns, and villages that were originally built on the banks of the Wei River were now in ruins. Every short distance, Lin Yuan could see all kinds of skeletons crawling on the side of the road. There were humans and monsters, and the air was filled with a pungent smell and miasma. This kind of purgatory on Earth lasted until Lin Yuan passed through the central region of the Shenwu dynasty along the Wei River and arrived in the south. Although there were still not many people, At least there were no skeletons and ruins in sight. This area was controlled by the 100 Victories fleet of the Azure River dynasty and the army under the Azure Canopy King, Lei Qiuming. Even someone as strong as the Sky Demon did not have the ability to break through their blockade when these two sides were prepared. Not to mention that there were many big shots in the sky who belonged to the Guardians of the Heaven's Gate. The boat was stopped by two boats. There were about 30 soldiers in total on the two ships. They were of average build, standing about 1.6 to 1.7 meters tall. Their cultivation was barely at the mid-level of the airborne realm. The armor they wore was not of the golden style of the Shenwu dynasty. Instead, they wore white armor with green robes. The words 100 Victories were engraved on their right armors. While they did not wear banners, their identities were clear to see. There was only one famous general in the Azure River dynasty. He was a figure from the same era as Lei Qiusheng and Yan Xingqi. He had fought with the two famous generals of the Wanjian dynasty several times. Relying on the fact that he was undefeated on the river and the boat, he was given the title of Duke of 100 Victories by the Emperor of the Azure River. His territory was convenient for the land along the river, and his army also walked on the Wei River with the banner of 100 Victories. Even though Lei Qiusheng had repeatedly insulted the Duke of Baixing, saying that Zhao Xiang was unworthy of the title of a famous general, and that as long as they went ashore, any general from the Shenwu dynasty could easily defeat the so-called Baixing army and the Duke of Baixing, he did not avoid the fact that once he entered the water, he would only be toyed with by the Duke of Baixing. This body of water is already under military control. I don't care where you're from. If you try to force your way in, we'll make sure you're buried in the mouths of the Wei River Yao beasts. The leader of the victorious army stepped on Lin Yuan's skiff with a single foot. He gave it a light kick, but the strength he displayed was exceptionally tyrannical. He actually managed to push Lin Yuan's skiff back 3 zhang. Lin Yuan frowned slightly, but he did not act out immediately. Instead, he took out a jade disc from his bosom and said in a deep voice, "I am the Vice President of the Association of the Northern Frontier, Lin Yin. I am under the orders of the Dragon King to send Ao Qian from the West Sea back to the Endless Sea. This is my clearance document." When the captain heard the words Northern Frontier, he frowned. After hesitating for a moment, he waved his hand in disgust and said coldly, "Just because you say you're from the Northern Frontier, you're from the Northern Frontier? During this period of time, there are many sky demons trying to enter the south using the name of the Northern Frontier. I'm too lazy to look at your clearance document. If you really want to go over, you have two choices. Either let us use the magic sealing bottle to check, or let the Ministry of Rights of the Northern Frontier communicate with us directly. Now, scram." The Northern Frontier was growing stronger day by day. Everyone knew that the Northern Frontier was not to be trifled with. If they could avoid it, they would not easily provoke it. It had already become a mutual understanding among the 6 empires. "I'm already here. Little General, you want me to go back with just a few words? Isn't that a little unreasonable?" Lin Yuan grinned, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Although the Azure River Empire was surrounded by rivers on both sides, it was not like there was no land route to speak of. From the steep mountain path of the Hengduan mountain range, one could directly reach the other party's territory. However, Lin Yuan did not choose that route. It was because going all the way south from the Wei River would lead directly to the Endless Sea. However, going by land would waste more time. Even if he crossed the Azure River Empire's territory and reached the seaside, it would be extremely difficult to get a ship that could go out to sea. All the ships of the Azure River Empire belonged to the Empire. No private forces were allowed to build ships. Once there were signs of it, the Azure River Empire would immediately extinguish it. After all, only by having the ships in their hands could they ensure that the enemy would not come ashore undetected and directly launch a surprise attack on the important cities of the Azure River Empire. Just like what Lei Qiusheng said, Even the only famous general of the Azure River Empire was only mediocre in terms of fighting land battles, let alone the other generals who were not even good at naval battles. However, passing the test of the magic sealing bottle was still an unacceptable condition for Lin Yuan. Right now, he was only a strand of divine thought attached to the puppet. Although he wasn't a heavenly demon, he would still be taken away by the magic sealing bottle. Although a strand of divine thought wasn't much of a loss to him, once he lost control of the puppet body, it could directly suffocate his original body in the beast pouch. He didn't know when he would be able to see the light of day again. As for directly revealing his original body, if the Azure River Empire, the Sky Demon Army, and the Southern Rebel Army knew that Lin Yuan had left the northern frontier, even if they did not organize people to surround and kill him, they would not miss this excellent opportunity to attack the northern frontier. That's easy. The captain grinned, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. He sneered and said, "If you have the ability to pass the test, we can also let you pass. However, I have to remind you, including the Southern Rebel Army of the Shenwu dynasty, both sides have arranged close to 1,000,000 troops on the Wei River. It is simply a pipe dream for you to pass the test with a small boat like yours." The so-called Great Pass was a battle technique that had a long history in the Azure River Empire. There were countless Navy troops in the Azure River Empire, and the conditions for promotion were not based on seniority or achievements. Instead, it was based on the ability to fight in the water. Every soldier could bring as many ships and people as possible. This included the allocation of equipment and the supply of ammunition strictly according to the rules. Then, under the principle of not harming lives, they would face off against another navy that wanted to be promoted. After the two sides faced off on the water, the victor would be resupplied and then directly face off against the assessment fleet sent by the Azure River Navy. If they won twice in a row, they would be promoted successfully. This was similar to the drill in Lin Yuan's previous life. It was the so-called Great Pass. It was also one of the main training methods of the Azure River Navy. However, even if there was a rule of not harming lives, it was inevitable that there would be quite a number of casualties and ships damaged. Therefore, the frequency of the Great Pass was not high. If Lin Yuan wanted to pass the test, he would have to rely on this small boat to face off against the entire Wei River Navy. 1 against 1,000,000. It would not kill him, but it would not prevent him from sinking ship. If Lin Yuan lost this round, he would have to swim along the Wei River back to the northern frontier. Pass the test? I've heard of it, but I've never played it before. It seems a little interesting. Lin Yuan also smiled, and the cold light in his pitch-black eyes became even sharper. Chapter 629. Ha 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 ha. The captain stomped his feet vigorously as if he had heard a great joke, causing the boat under his feet to constantly tremble, as if it could capsize at any time. His laughter lasted for a full 5 to 6 breaths of time, and only then did he stop abruptly when tears almost came out of his eyes. "Hey kid, did I hear you wrong? Are you sure you want to play a game of clearing the level with us? You want to fight with over 1,000,000 of us by yourself? Not to mention that we are the invincible victorious army, even if we were to bring over 1,000,000 pigs, you would still be tired of killing them, right?" The captain stopped laughing, but he didn't stop laughing. From his trembling voice and trembling facial muscles, he could laugh out loud again at any time. "I am serious about clearing the level, but—" Lin Yuan didn't seem to care about the others' laughter at all. However, the temperature around him dropped by dozens of degrees, and the river water on both sides of the boat faintly condensed into white frost. Lin Yuan said with a cold face, "Who told you that I am alone?" As his voice fell, the entire Wei River surged. Countless aquatic monsters slowly popped their heads out, and pairs of flickering eyes fell on the captain's face. Countless aquatic monsters gathered together to form a killing intent that covered the sky and covered the earth. In almost an instant, The smile on the captain's face directly froze. He looked at Lin Yuan in disbelief, as if wondering what kind of god this person was. Due to its special geographical environment, the Qinjiang Empire was considered the most friendly empire to the demonic beasts among the 7 empires. Whether it was the Dragon Palace in the Endless Sea or the demonic Beast Palace in the Hengduan Mountains, they all had a good relationship with the Qinjiang Empire. Even though the demonic beasts in the Wei River often fought with the Qinjiang Navy, many of the Beast Kings had a good relationship with the Qinjiang Navy. As his voice fell, the monsters of the Wei River all came out. It seemed that none of the Beast Kings were willing to give face to the victorious army. When had they ever seen such a scene? The captain stretched out his hand and patted his cheek, softening his stiff expression. Then he said with a heavy face, "To be able to make the monsters of the Wei River give you face, no wonder you can safely travel south on a small boat. It seems like you are really someone from the northern frontier." "What do you mean?" Lin Yuan raised his eyebrows, somewhat puzzled by the other party's sudden change in attitude. "If you had shown this earlier or asked the Wei River Beast Kings to mediate on your behalf, we would have let you go. However, we can't do that now. In our Azure River Empire, as long as you say you want to clear the stage, no matter what the reason is, whether you are willing or not, you have to finish this round before it counts. The rules are set and it's hard to change them." The captain spread out his hands and said in a deep voice, "You wait here. I will go back and report. The next time we meet, we will directly attack you and these demonic beasts. But don't worry, we will not take your life, nor will we sink your ship. Next, either you beat us until we can't stand up, or we beat you until you can't stand up. No matter what the result is, we will let you go." "Thank you." Lin Yuan nodded slightly and did not object. Every place had its own rules. Just like in the northern frontier, no matter if it was humans or demonic beasts, as long as the Azure River Empire was involved in clearing the stage, as long as they opened their mouths, they had to finish it. Rules were set by humans. They could be changed, but they had to be respected. Only if you respected other people's rules, would they respect your rules. About 10 minutes later, the captain did not directly return to say anything to Lin Yuan. However, in Lin Yuan's vision, there were hundreds of boats, and every one of them was filled with the 100 Victories Navy. However, Lin Yuan also saw that the 100 Victories Navy had changed to blunt weapons. The arrows that were drawn from the quiver had been chopped off from the shoulders and replaced with round stones. Although it would be very painful if it hit a person's body, it was not fatal. As long as it didn't hit the eyes or other places, it would not be a problem. Further away, the medium-sized boats were also ready to set off. There were also large boats like the turreted boat. However, the cannoneers on the boats had all retreated into the cabins, and the musketeers were nowhere to be seen. Most of them were armed with crossbows. Obviously, when the other party said that they would not kill, they were serious. "You are all natives of Wei River. Naturally, you know the rules of clearing the stage. This time, you are not allowed to kill. Overturn their boats and send them back to the shore. If anyone breaks the rules, don't say that I am not merciful." After seeing the other party's reaction, Lin Yuan also gave a few instructions to the demonic beasts around him with a serious expression. Shortly after, the demonic beasts rushed out. Under the push of Lin Yuan's demonic chi, the boat was like a rocket. It had no intention of dodging the victorious army's boats and directly crashed into the enemy's encirclement. However, the first batch of boats that came out did not even have the qualifications to approach Lin Yuan. Almost all of them were surrounded by the demonic beasts and began to collide with each other. The boats were constantly shaking. Those that were able to stand firm were fine, but those that were not were directly thrown into the Wei River. Under such conditions, they could not get close to Lin Yuan, so the value of blunt weapons was naturally not great. Even those archers did not expect Lin Yuan to advance instead of retreating. They did not even have time to shoot an arrow before they were hit by the demonic beast. They could not even do basic aiming. They could only barely grab the places on the boat that they could grab to ensure that they would not be overturned and fall into the water. Lin Yuan did not stop and continued to charge forward. The victorious army's generals were originally grimacing in pain when they saw their soldiers fall into the water. However, in the next moment, they saw the Wei River's demonic beasts pick up the victorious army soldiers and throw them one by one onto the shore. Only then did they let out a sigh of relief. They're all waiting for the food to be served. They're almost in your face, and you're still not shooting? The general slapped a dumbfounded soldier aside and knocked an arrow on his bow, firing 3 arrows at once. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Lin Yuan's lips curled up as he listened to the sound of the arrows piercing through the air. When he looked up, he saw a dense mass of arrows bearing down on him. Although these arrows were not fatal, it was clear that if he did not hit any part of the body, these arrows would hurt a lot. And when the number of arrows reached a certain point, the boat might even sink. Whoosh! Lin Yuan exhaled a breath of white air. A sparkling and translucent ice shield appeared in front of the boat. The aquatic demonic beasts also continued to release their innate abilities. A large number of water-washing techniques rose up to block the arrows for Lin Yuan. The remaining arrows also hit the ice shield with tinkling sounds, and then fell powerlessly into the Wei River and were washed away. Isn't this a violation of the rules? The general sucked in a breath of cold air. Chapter 630. A large number of arrows were shot out, but they didn't even touch the opponent. How embarrassing! He even felt that the Azure River Navy's hundreds of years of reputation on the Wei River would be ruined because of this battle. The general drew his bow personally and gathered his chi on the arrow through his hands. Whoosh! The arrow left his hand and pierced through the countless demonic beasts' water-cleansing technique as if it was paper. It didn't seem to be obstructed at all. The arrow slammed into the ice shield, but the effect wasn't ideal. Although it didn't fall directly into the Wei River like the previous arrow, it only penetrated half an inch into the ice shield. Damn! The general couldn't help but curse again. This arrow was already shot with all his strength. Although he used an ordinary stone arrow, unless he used the special arrows of the victorious army, the effect would be the same if he used an ordinary arrow. He still couldn't break through the layer of ice shield. Moreover, that would be breaking the rules. In the Azure River Empire, breaking the rules of passing through a checkpoint would result in severe punishment. Even the royal family would lose their lives, let alone a deputy general from a humble background. The first checkpoint set up by the victorious army did not stop Lin Yuan. Even all the countermeasures made by the victorious army were ignored by Lin Yuan. The small boat under Lin Yuan's feet, which was weak and pitiful in the eyes of the victorious army, did not even leave a mark on it. Soon, the small boat was already in front of the general's ship. It was like a black arrow, and in about 2 breaths, it would completely break through the ship that hadn't formed a battle and reach the next checkpoint. Hey kid! The general looked at Lin Yuan, who was about to rush in front of him, and shouted, I have already signaled to the fleet behind. Your ice shield is too much of a violation, so the fleet behind will use catapults, but they will only fill them with stones. Don't misunderstand. Thank you for telling me. Lin Yuan cupped his fists at the general. Demonic chi erupted, and the speed of the boat increased by 30%. It turned into a black shadow, and directly pierced through the first checkpoint. The general took off his helmet and touched his bald head. He cursed, It's so embarrassing today. I'm the first deputy general of the victorious army, but I can't even stop a small boat. Old Zhao will scold me to death later. Due to the rules of clearing the level, this battle was fought with their hands and feet tied. However, the fact remained that they were unable to stop the enemy. The warships were unable to form a blockade, and were unable to stop the enemy's advance. The attacks of the archers on the medium-sized warships were directly ineffective. It was as though they were burning money to shoot at the Wei River. Before the warships behind them could complete their preparations, they had already been defeated. With such a battle record, not to mention the victorious army, even an ordinary Qing River Navy deputy general would be scolded to the point that he could not take care of himself. He might not even be able to keep his helmet. The general shuddered at the thought, and a cold smirk appeared on his face. But then again, this is good. I hope that kid can continue to win. I've already bought enough time for them. Compared to me, they can still use catapults. If they still can't stop that freakish kid, they'll be more embarrassed than I am. Logically speaking, when it came to embarrassing things, the more people there were, the better. Otherwise, if the entire victorious army laughed at him, he would not be able to continue. However, if the people behind him were to be fully prepared and still failed to stop that kid, then they would be even more embarrassed than him. By then, it was hard to say who would be the laughing stock. Lin Yuan did not think about what the general was thinking, because he had already passed the first checkpoint. Before he was able to catch his breath, he saw rocks coming at him from all directions. Rocks of such scale were not something that ordinary cultivators could take on. Even if they were not like those kinds of projectiles that were engraved with formations or mixed with special metals, such a scale was something that even airborne realm cultivators would not have the guts to take on head-on. They could only rely on their body movements to avoid the enemy's attack. However, there were rules to clearing the level. No matter how the fight went, as long as the opponent was forced to abandon the ship, then it was considered a victory. Lin Yuan looked around with a cold expression. Although he easily passed through the first level, not all the demonic beasts could follow him. Just like the battleships that were intercepted by the demonic beasts, the demonic beasts behind would continue to be intercepted by the navy of the first level. The demonic beasts that were not strong enough had no hope of continuing to help Lin Yuan. Forget it, it's not a real confrontation between two armies. Even if I fight to the death, as long as I can pass, then it's considered a victory. Lin Yuan opened his mouth and said something as if he was talking to himself. However, at the same time that he said this, Lin Yuan also made up his mind. When he returned to the northern frontier, he had to train the navy. Otherwise, even if he had the Wei River, he would still have to rely on the embarrassing fortifications along the river. Moreover, the Xinjiang dynasty would be included in Lin Yuan's territory in the future. If Lin Yuan wanted to cross the river, he would have to personally lead a large number of aquatic monsters and support the northern frontier army through the Hengduan Mountains. He could easily wipe out the military forces of the Xinjiang dynasty, which were known as water dragons. However, that obviously would not work. In the end, Lin Yuan was just a monster. The 6 dynasties could tolerate the existence of the northern frontier regime, but they could not just stand by and watch a monster like Lin Yuan do whatever he wanted. If Lin Yuan relied on the power of monsters to fight with the Xinjiang dynasty, the remaining 5 dynasties would definitely not sit by and watch. After all, no one wanted to become the next Xinjiang dynasty. Moreover, if that happened, the Xinjiang dynasty's territory would also be in chaos after being occupied. In order to avoid all these dangers, they could only rely on the northern frontier to crush the Xinjiang dynasty and use the navy to defeat their navy. This way, not only would they not be mocked by the other 5 dynasties, it would also reduce the resistance of the people of the Xinjiang dynasty against the northern frontier. After all, the Xinjiang navy was like the divine martial heavy-step army. They were the face of the dynasty and also their last dignity. If they were unable to defeat the northern frontier army, even if there were ambitious people who wanted to cause trouble, those cowardly ones would obediently tuck their tails between their legs and behave themselves. Thinking up to here, Lin Yuan's expression became slightly better. He slowly bent down and gently stroked the surface of the Wei River with his right hand. Boom! A giant made entirely out of ice stood up shakily from the Wei River. With a wave of its crystal-clear hand, it pushed away all the flying rocks in front of it. Then, it walked with earth-shaking steps towards the second stage where the ships were waiting. Passing this stage is a confrontation between two armies. No one said that I can only run or defend, right? This time, it's my turn to attack. Lin Yuan stood at the bow of the boat. His voice was not loud, but it strangely covered the majestic waves of the Wei River and transmitted into the second stage's ship formation. Chapter 631. The guardian of the second stage was a young man who looked to be in his 20s. He was wearing a brown martial attire and his upper body was bare. His entire body was covered with muscles, making him look like a standing bear. His long red hair was tied up in a braid and hung in front of his chest. On his back was a pure black tattoo of an evil dragon. Although it wasn't finished, it lacked some spirituality and at the same time, it was also more ferocious. The young man's waist was tied with a hemp rope that had been washed white. On the hemp rope hung 9 red bells. However, the wind and waves on the Wei River seemed to be unable to move the 9 bells at all. The young man stood at the bow of the ship like a statue. If it was not for the slight rise and fall of his chest that proved that he was still alive. When Lin Yuan saw the young man appear at the bow of the ship, he could not help but have a serious expression on his face. According to the information brought by Zhang Xiu, although the Qing River Navy had many capable navy generals, most of the elites were gathered under the victorious army. In the victorious army, other than the victorious Duke Zhao Xiang, there was only one other person worth paying attention to. The rolling sea evil flood dragon, Ning Tianxing. He was also known as Tianbao Zai or Yao Ning. Ning Tianxing was a true genius that was 1 in a million. He was only 40 years old this year, but he had stepped into the air at the age of 19, achieving the step of eternal youth. In the following 21 years, Ning Tianxing's cultivation had risen steadily. It was said that he had reached the late stage of the Heaven Dipper realm. Among the cultivators under 60 years old in the Qing River Empire, his strength was enough to rank him in the top 3. However, aptitude and strength were not the most legendary aspects of Ning Tianxing. It was said that Ning Tianxing's origin was unknown. Back then, he floated along the Wei River all the way to the Qing River Empire's waters and was adopted by Zhao Xiang. The ferocious Wei River monsters had no intention of killing this infant and even took the initiative to help him kill the unintelligent carnivorous fishes. Therefore, there had always been a rumor that Ning Tianxing was half human and half demon. He was actually the son of a Wei River monster. Some people said that Ning Tianxing's luck was so good that even the heavens could not bear to let him die so young. Therefore, people called him Tianbao Zai. Yao Ning referred to Ning Tianxing's ferocious and ruthless nature. He was usually joking, but once he was on the battlefield, he instantly turned into an emotionless human life harvester. The auxiliary troops he led never surrendered. Whether they were fighting or not, as long as they faced him, they would be completely annihilated. Even if they kneeled and begged for surrender, they would be pushed to the Wei River monsters. This name was Ning Tianxing's in human nature. It was as if he was like a ferocious monster. Then there was the evil dragon tattoo on Ning Tianxing's back. He did not find someone to tattoo it on later to scare people. He was born with it. When he was young, it was just a small black dot. As his body grew older, it became more and more complete. It only became this tattoo when he became an adult. It was said that after the tattoo appeared, Ning Tianxing could even walk on the Wei River. Whether the Wei River was calm or the waves surged, it all depended on his thoughts. This was also the origin of the nickname Rolling Sea Evil Dragon. The embroidered uniform guard collected a large amount of information on Ning Tianxing. They vaguely speculated that Ning Tianxing might really have the bloodline of a monster. However, no one had ever heard of a monster and a human combining to give birth to an existence like Ning Tianxing, who looked completely different from a human. There were many kinds of demi-humans, but one that was 100% human was unheard of. However, it was also based on this speculation that the embroidered uniform guard determined that Lin Yuan, who was born as a monster, had the opportunity to subdue Ning Tianxing. The probability of him becoming the flag-bearer of the Northern Frontier Navy was very high. That was why they spent so much effort to study this number 2 figure of the victorious army. Even if Ning Tianxing was Zhao Xiang's adopted son, it did not matter. Because humans and monsters belonged to 2 races that could not mix. Even in the Northern Frontier, everyone could only live in harmony. If they wanted to be as close as a family, there was still a long way to go. Therefore, as long as it was confirmed that Ning Tianxing had the bloodline of a monster, even if Zhao Xiang protected him, there would be no place for him in the Azure River dynasty. At this moment, when he saw Ning Tianxing with his own eyes, Lin Yuan grinned for a moment. Only then did he take a deep breath. His face once again returned to its previous serious appearance. Ning Tianxing not only had the bloodline of a monster, he was also a monster in human form. Although he did not know how this senior was able to transform, Lin Yuan's interest in Ning Tianxing was unprecedentedly high. In the chaotic world, there was a saying that monsters could transform. Not only monsters, even plants and spirits could transform. However, in a world like the Tianwu continent, where the martial strength was low, even the monsters that were qualified to guard the gate of heaven and stood at the top of the world did not have this ability. Under such conditions, Lin Yuan naturally did not expect to have the opportunity to transform. Even if there was such a day, it would be when he stepped into the chaotic world and faced the pressure from Hongjun. However, Ning Tianxing's predecessor, the Rolling Sea Evil Flood Dragon, had achieved this. As a water flood dragon, Lin Yuan could clearly smell the scent of his own kind on Ning Tianxing's body. Of course, Ning Tianxing was definitely not as strong as his, who had been strengthened by the system and whose bloodline had reached 100%. However, his bloodline was definitely at least 80% or 80%. Monsters of this level could be said to be rare. Even some of the monsters in the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas, who called themselves the Dragon Clan, did not have such a thick bloodline. Therefore, Lin Yuan guessed that Ning Tianxing's father was most likely a true dragon. Moreover, it was a true dragon from the chaotic world. Otherwise, Ning Tianxing would not have been able to transform. A little interesting. When Ning Tianxing saw the huge ice giant, his expression did not change. He just personally walked to the bow of the ship. However, after seeing Lin Yuan, Ning Tianxing's eyes revealed an obvious look of excitement, as if he had seen an incredible treasure. Monsters of the same kind were very sensitive to the scent of their own kind. Even though Lin Yuan possessed the body of the puppet with his divine thoughts at this moment, in order to make this puppet act like his own arm and perfectly bear the control of his divine thoughts, Lin Yuan also carried the body of the puppet with him and tempered it with his divine thoughts at all times. Not to mention, there were many dragon scales shed by Lin Yuan in the material of the puppet. Stop. You can't do anything to him. Ning Tianxing slowly said to the messenger next to him. I will personally go into the water and play with him. You guys stay on the side and don't interfere. In addition, signal the fleet behind us. If I can't beat him in the water, tell them not to waste their efforts. Just let him go and pass the last test with my foster father. Young Master Tianxing, this. The guard next to him opened his eyes wide and looked at Ning Tianxing in disbelief. He opened his mouth and tried to dissuade him. I don't like to say the same thing twice. Do you know that? Ning Tianxing turned his head with a smile and looked at the guard next to him. His tone was somewhat playful. Chapter 632. Yes, I'll send the flag signal right away. The bodyguard hurriedly nodded, and a thin layer of cold sweat appeared on his forehead. Although Ning Tianxing was Zhao Xiang's adopted son, Zhao Xiang had many wives and concubines, and he had more than 30 sons. Naturally, it wasn't Ning Tianxing's turn to inherit the Zhao family's business and the title of Duke of Victory. However, Ning Tianxing's abilities were outstanding, and he was much stronger than Zhao Xiang's children. That was why he was able to make a name for himself in the victorious army. Ning Tianxing was called Yao Ning by others, so he naturally wasn't an approachable person. Those who dared to argue with Ning Tianxing would most likely appear in the Wei River on the same day and become the food of countless Wei River demon beasts. Even his close subordinates were no exception. If Ning Tianxing were to say the same thing twice, then he would be courting death. Soon, the flag signal was sent out, and the second formation of boats stopped. They even took the initiative to open up a wide area. Ning Tianxing stretched his muscles and jumped off the boat without saying a word. The Wei River, which had been stirred up by the ice giant, calmed down in an instant, as if it had an owner. Ning Tianxing entered the water barefoot. He stepped on the calm surface of the river and walked step by step toward the boat Lin Yuan was on. Ha! Before he could take 10 steps, Ning Tianxing paused. He opened his mouth, took a deep breath, and let out a wild roar. In an instant, the waves on the Wei River surged. A powerful gust of wind turned into a giant blade that slammed into the ice giant. Countless rocks only splashed a layer of ice, and the ice giant was as fragile as a thin sheet of paper. It was instantly shredded into pieces and swept into the Wei River. Not only was the spell broken, but even the Wei River monsters around Lin Yuan began to hesitate. After all, the one standing on the boat was a king, and the one who just entered the water was also a king. How could these shrimp soldiers and crab generals have the right to make a fuss when two kings meet? I don't want to break your boat. Come down and play. Ning Tianxing stood in the same place with a warm smile on his face. If one didn't look at his burly bear-like body, just by looking at his jade-white face and delicate facial features, he didn't look like a flood dragon, but more like a shy boy next door. Okay. Lin Yuan also smiled, stretched out his hand, and waved back the group of monsters around him. Imitating Ning Tianxing, he stepped on the Wei River. At this moment, the raging and whistling wind blades were like a dying person being choked by the throat. The fierce sound subsided. When Lin Yuan stood firmly on his feet, the wind blades instantly collapsed, and the wind waves in front of him stopped at this moment. Lin Yuan and Ning Tian were less than a kilometer apart. With their cultivation and strength, they could easily cross the distance in a few steps. But in this short distance, the Wei River was like two completely different rivers. The waves around Ning Tianxing's raging waves surged to the sky. King meet king. Flood dragon against flood dragon. Even Lin Yuan didn't expect that his first battle in the water after coming to the Qinjiang dynasty's territory would be with a demonic beast in human form. Ning Tianxing giggled. After seeing Lin Yuan enter the water, he stepped barefoot on the water surface, and his figure swept out like a sharp arrow. On the other side, Lin Yuan seemed to have discussed with the other party early on. The movements of the two were completely synchronized until they completely collided. The two figures, one black and one white, almost turned into rainbows and constantly collided. Except for the dull sound of fists hitting flesh, even the wind and waves seemed to have lost their silence. That weird kid can actually walk on water, and his speed is not slower than General Ning's. A captain of the Triumph military force exclaimed in disbelief. Walking on water was not a difficult task. While airborne realm cultivators were unable to truly fly, they were able to stay in the air for a while by relying on their spiritual qi. Cultivators who cultivated water-type methods after reaching the airborne realm would also be able to easily walk on water, but that was just ordinary walking. Like Lin Yuan and Ning Tianxing, who could fight and run on water as if it was flat ground, was already something only heavenly strength realm cultivators could do. However, no matter how powerful a water-type heavenly strength realm cultivator was, they couldn't control the weather of the Wei River. The scene where the water was half calm and half raging waves was like something that could be done by the great beings in the legends. They originally thought that Ning Tianxing was terrifying enough to be able to do that. That was also why Ning Tianxing was able to squeeze out countless young talents in the Qinjiang dynasty at a young age and become the deputy general of the Triumph military force. No one thought that there was someone in the world who could control water as well as Ning Tianxing. Boom, boom. Two dull sounds were heard. Ning Tianxing and Lin Yuan each took 3 steps back. Lin Yuan was punched in the abdomen, but his puppet body had no internal organs and no aura, so he was only pushed back a few steps by the strange force. Ning Tianxing, on the other hand, was punched in the face. His nose was caved in, and a lot of blood flowed down. However, he still had a smile on his face, and it was impossible to tell that he was injured by a punch. "You are very strange. You can actually suppress my ability to control water." Ning Tianxing wiped the blood off his face, as if he didn't notice that he was injured. He sneered and said, "But you won't be so lucky next time. You let me have a weakness, but you have a bigger weakness." Lin Yuan tilted his head and sneered, "I know, I don't have enough strength. If we have the same strength, this punch of mine can directly smash your head. But if you want to compete in physical skills, are you sure you can do it?" When Lin Yuan's voice fell, the smile on Ning Tianxing's face froze. He couldn't see through Lin Yuan's cultivation at all, but in terms of control of the Wei River, the two sides seemed to be evenly matched. Moreover, the other side had a strange ability that kept suppressing him, causing him to be restrained. He could only use 70% of his strength, and he felt inexplicably uncomfortable. What was even more strange was that Lin Yuan was able to fight evenly with him, but was far inferior to him in terms of strength. As Lin Yuan said, if it was a cultivator of the same level as him, that punch just now could directly smash his head. Even if it didn't shatter, it could make him faint. But this punch only broke the bridge of his nose. For an existence like him, even his fighting strength wasn't affected, and it wouldn't take long for him to recover. In terms of strength, it could be said that the other side's level was lower than his, but the strength of his body was a bit too terrifying. Although the two of them were fighting with their lives on the line just now. Ning Tianxing made this judgment after testing Lin Yuan's strength, but Lin Yuan didn't seem to care at all, as if he didn't think Ning Tianxing had the ability to hurt him. He directly hit his fist with his abdomen, resulting in a situation where one punch was exchanged for another. Chapter 633. Ning Tianxing really wanted to know how Lin Yuan refined his body. This freak didn't seem to have refined his strength, but his body was as hard as a magic weapon. It was terrifying. According to Ning Tianxing's estimation, even if the punch just now wasn't enough to take Lin Yuan's life, and even if it couldn't penetrate his abdomen, it could at least stir up his internal organs and cause him serious internal injuries. But the result was that Lin Yuan only retreated 3 steps, and even his aura seemed to be non-existent. There wasn't the slightest sign that his aura was in disorder. Body matching technique? In terms of speed, the two were equal. In terms of strength, Ning Tianxing won. But in terms of defense and resistance, Ning Tianxing felt that even if his whole body was broken, he still wouldn't be able to hurt his opponent. Seeing that Lin Yuan was still standing in the same place, but the surface of the Wei River under his feet was slightly rippling, Ning Tianxing's eyes suddenly focused, and he subconsciously retreated 2 steps, looking at Lin Yuan with vigilance. Up until now, both sides had only been probing each other with the exception of the last desperate punch for punch. However, if this battle were to continue, no one would be able to gain much of an advantage. Although he wasn't really afraid of this freak, who came out of nowhere, Ning Tianxing didn't want to reveal his trump card in this kind of game, like clearing a level. Not to mention facing an existence whose ability to control water was not weaker than his own, and who could also rely on some kind of special power to interfere with him. Even if he revealed one or two trump cards, he might not be able to win. He had to go all out. My name is Ning Tianxing. What's your name? Ning Tianxing gently waved his hand, and used his other hand to cover his nose that was constantly bleeding, and said helplessly, I'm afraid of you. You just want to borrow a path. Don't tell me you really want to fight me to the death? Lin Yuan. Seeing Ning Tianxing retreat, Lin Yuan also withdrew the demonic power he was mobilizing, and let out a long breath. The body of a puppet was rootless. Although it couldn't display its full strength after being refined by him, it could use the skills of the system. Obviously, Lin Yuan couldn't take advantage of it all. The power of the skills couldn't be displayed by half, but the consumption was doubled. And all the demonic power was directly extracted from Lin Yuan's body by the system. Even if he had the method to increase his demonic power by visualizing the star concealment diagram, and the additional demonic power from the transaction of Joss flames, he couldn't rely on the body of a puppet to fight a high-intensity war of attrition. If Ning Tianxing was as stupid and stubborn as the rumors said, he would sooner or later reveal his true form, and then bring some unnecessary trouble. But even so, Lin Yuan wasn't afraid of fighting. Even if other forces took advantage of him during the time he went to the West Sea Dragon Palace, it wouldn't destroy his foundation. At worst, he could take revenge on them one by one in the future. Lin Yuan didn't want to reveal his true form because he didn't think it was necessary. But Ning Tianxing was also a demonic beast. If the intensity of the battle was too high, he would most likely reveal his true form or use demonic power to fight with Lin Yuan. If he revealed his demonic power in front of the elites of the victorious army, Ning Tianxing wouldn't have a foothold in the Azure River Empire in the future. So when Lin Yuan planned to continue the battle, Ning Tianxing took the initiative to retreat, indicating that he didn't want to continue being an enemy. I'm very interested in you. Can you tell me how you interfered with my control of the Wei River? Ning Tianxing slowly put down his hand that was covering his nose. His nose that was broken by Lin Yuan had completely healed, and he returned to his appearance when he got off the boat. It was as if the battle just now didn't happen at all. Then can you tell me how you managed to transform? Lin Yuan's eyes narrowed slightly, and he asked with a faint smile. As his voice fell, both of them fell silent. Transforming into a demonic beast was Ning Tianxing's biggest taboo. Although there were rumors that he was a demonic beast, it was just that he accidentally revealed his demonic aura when he was ignorant. After that, he and Zhao Xiang cleaned up all the loose ends. Those who had evidence had already been killed. So what was circulating was just a rumor. Not many people had evidence that he was a demonic beast. And Zhao Xiang, who knew his identity, had to rely on Ning Tianxing, this evil dragon, to protect the Azure River Empire after he died. So, he wouldn't say a word to the outside world. So far, Ning Tianxing was undoubtedly very safe. Even if someone like Lin Yuan knew his identity, it was useless. Even if an outsider said it, how many people would believe it? The royal family of the Azure River Empire had probably communicated with Zhao Xiang long ago and also knew his identity. It was just that before a new guardian appeared in the Azure River Empire and had enough confidence to deal with him, the royal family would definitely not do anything to him. Instead, they would strictly protect his identity. But this was still his taboo. Although it wasn't to the extent of exploding on the spot, Ning Tianxing quickly realized that the ability to control other people's water was also a secret to Lin Yuan that wasn't inferior to his transformation. If he wanted to know the origin and cultivation method of this ability, he had to tell Lin Yuan an equivalent secret. Then forget it. Ning Tianxing looked at Lin Yuan with vigilance. Lin Yuan shook his head and interrupted Ning Tianxing's excuse. he smiled and said, I don't think I will just let it go like this. Sooner or later, I will know the secret of your transformation. Do you believe me? Ning Tianqing was silent for a moment and slowly raised his middle finger at Lin Yuan. He said coldly, If that day really comes, it means that the Azure River Empire will be flattened by you, boss. I know you are from the northern frontier, but don't tell me you think that Black Jiao has the ability to take down the Azure River Empire? Why not? Lin Yuan shrugged and didn't comment on Ning Tianqing's opinion. He even had a hint of mockery. The Black Jiao wants the Azure River Empire's territory. Sure, let his northern frontier king send troops to fight. If those Northland barbarians can defeat old Zhao's victorious army, not to mention my secret, I can even tell you the secret of the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas. Ning Tianqing obviously didn't intend to continue hiding his identity from Lin Yuan, who had seen through his identity. He even vaguely pointed out his relationship with the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas. Only then did he look at Lin Yuan with a faint smile. This guy from the northern frontier obviously wanted to go out to sea. Now that he had offended the members of the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas before he even reached the sea, he would suffer when he went out to sea. Unfortunately, Lin Yuan's face was still as calm as before. He wasn't scared by Ning Tianqing at all. It seemed that he couldn't even cooperate with him to make a surprised and fearful expression to satisfy Ning Tianqing's bad taste. Shall we make a bet? Lin Yuan shrugged his shoulders, raised his eyebrows and asked. Chapter 634. Bet? Interesting. Tell me, how do you want to bet? Lin Yuan wasn't frightened. Instead, Ning Tianqing's curiosity was piqued by Lin Yuan and he asked excitedly. Due to his ferocious personality, Ning Tianqing's existence was very important to the Azure River Empire. Hence, his status was very high. However, there weren't many who were willing to make friends with him. Most of them didn't even have the guts to joke with him, let alone bet with him. I will bet with you. Within half a year, cross the northern frontier and flatten the Azure River Navy. If I lose, I will tell you what my ability is. If you lose, other than the secret of your transformation, I want you to work for me. Lin Yuan spoke very quickly, but his tone was resolute as if there was no room for doubt. Such words might sound like a loss to others, but to Ning Tianqing, a great demon who could control the Wei River, it was rather attractive. After all, it was like Zhao Xiang's status in the Azure River Empire. Although he was respected, he didn't lack challengers. Ning Tianqing's status in the Wei River was the same. Although most of the demonic beasts didn't dare to compete with him, there were still plenty of demonic beasts who didn't listen to his orders. Even the flood dragons from the endless sea coveted his position. There were more challengers than Zhao Xiang. If it wasn't for his transformation, he would have been chased to other places to make a living. However, if he had Lin Yuan's ability to interfere with others' control of water, his status in the Wei River would be completely stabilized. Even the dragon race from the endless sea might not be able to threaten his position. Sure. Ning Tianqing nodded. There wasn't much expression on his face, but there was obvious excitement in his eyes. Previously, he didn't dare to confirm Lin Yuan's identity. However, according to the news that came back, a vice president of the Association of the Demon Emperor obviously didn't have the guts and ability to subdue a famous general of the Azure River Empire. Moreover, Lin Yuan had already seen through his disguise as a demonic beast. Unless the uncrowned king of the northern frontier personally came out. In addition, he had smelled the scent of his own kind from Lin Yuan's body, as well as the faintly discernible demonic energy when the two of them fought. Coupled with Lin Yuan's question about his transformation, all of this had exposed Lin Yuan's identity. If Ning Tian was the role model of the younger generation of water generals in the Qinjiang dynasty, in that case, Lin Yuan, who took advantage of the chaos as a demon beast to rise to prominence and become a dominant figure, vaguely showing signs of annexing the Shinwu dynasty, was undoubtedly the role model in the hearts of all demon beasts. However, just like how Lin Yuan wouldn't reveal his identity as a demonic beast, he wouldn't be stupid enough to reveal Lin Yuan's identity. On the surface, he was a water general of the Qinjiang dynasty, but secretly, he was a spy planted by the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas. How could he not know that Lin Yuan went south because of the invitation of the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas? Even the little princess of the West Sea Dragon Palace stayed in the northern frontier for a period of time. If he revealed Lin Yuan's true identity now, then Lin Yuan would have enough reason to return to the northern frontier and ignore the invitation of the West Sea Dragon Palace. Lin Yuan's side was fine. At most, the West Sea Dragon Palace would continue to torture him. If he ruined the plans of the West Sea Dragon Palace, the dragon race in the Endless Sea would definitely not mind tearing him apart or sinking him to the bottom of the Endless Sea to be classified as a sin dragon. I've already spoken to my subordinate. They said that if I can't stop you, then there's no need to stop you in the later stages. Ning Tianxing stretched his body and said with a smile, "It's about time to finish clearing all the stages. If you can get past Old Man Zhao, then everything will be peaceful. Otherwise, you can only take the land route and return to the sea with your true form." As soon as he finished speaking, Ning Tianxing waved his hand and walked back to his ship with a nonchalant expression. The previous battle was very fast, and both parties did not use their full strength. Hence, it looked like they were evenly matched. However, if Ning Tianxing returned to his ship like this, it meant that he admitted that he had lost to Lin Yuan. Including him, all the previous stages of Zhao Xiang would choose to let him pass and not continue to stop Lin Yuan from clearing the stage. After all, Zhao Xiang was old. The Qinjiang dynasty would not disrespect Ning Tianxing. However, to Ning Tianxing, who had never been defeated before, it was undoubtedly a huge blow. Even those competitors who no longer coveted his position as the next general of the victorious army would have their ambitions reignited. After taking a few steps, Ning Tianxing turned back and said, "As for the transfiguration method, although I can't tell you directly, I can reveal some information to you. Before I transfigured, I was the Dragon King of an area along the coast of the Qinjiang dynasty." Speaking of this, Ning Tianxing paused again. A touch of shame appeared on his face, and he said in a low voice, "But I'm not the real Dragon King. You know that the people along the coast and river always like to call some aquatic monsters the Dragon King. F***ck, they don't care about the reputation of the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas at all. Of course, the Dragon King won't settle accounts with them, but he will definitely deal with us." After speaking, he waved his hand and strode away. He had no intention of looking back. Lin Yuan frowned slightly. Could the transfiguration method be related to the power of incense? Be it in his previous life or this life, humans seemed to be particular about living off the mountains and living off the rivers. There were actually human villages in the Hengduan mountain range, but these villages would consecrate the nearby Beast King as their guardian deity. It wasn't the kind of consecration that would build a temple. Instead, they would regularly hand over meat and fays as tributes in exchange for safety. However, these people who lived near the water really had to take boats to fish. They had to face those ferocious monsters directly. Therefore, they had to be sincere when worshipping the Beast King. Otherwise, they would be using themselves as tributes again, boasting that the other party was the Dragon King, the Water God, and so on were just basic operations. They would often open temples and even worship during festivals as if they really treated the other party as a deity. After a long time, if the Beast King that was worshipped could really guarantee their peace, it would naturally develop into true believers to provide them with the power of incense. In his previous life, because of the myths, there were many mountain gods and water gods. However, there were many cultivators in the sky martial continent. Although there were legends in their eyes, the so-called gods were just powerful cultivators. In addition to the land's demonic beasts, there were not many mountain gods. On the contrary, there were many water gods. Ning Tianxing should have been one of them. However, if the transfiguration method was related to the power of incense, how much incense would it take to transfiguration? Previously, when he traded with Lei Qiuxing 200,000 incense, Lin Yuan did not hear the system prompt that he could transfiguration. Was there a problem with the method Ning Tianxing gave him, or did he not have enough incense at that time? Chapter 635. Lin Yuan couldn't figure out the relationship between shape-shifting and the power of incense, so he could only let out a long sigh. He walked back to his boat and continued towards the estuary. Ning Tianxing didn't have a good reputation in the Qinjiang dynasty, but as a powerful man, he had always been regarded as the successor of the guardian of the Qinjiang dynasty after Zhao Xiang, so his prestige in the army wasn't low. With Ning Tianxing's greeting, the rest of Lin Yuan's journey could be said to be unimpeded. When passing through the remaining checkpoints, the generals just stood at the bow of the ship and glanced curiously at the young man who could fight with Ning Tianxing on the surface of the Wei River, but did not intend to make a move. The Baixing Navy's boat formation was divided into 5 levels. To pass the checkpoint, one had to pass through these 5 formations. After passing the first 4 checkpoints easily, Lin Yuan saw the 5th checkpoint appear in his sight. He instantly gasped. There were no fighting boats prepared to intercept the boat, nor were there any arrows or stones as he expected. However, there were many ships chained together on the Wei River, occupying almost the entire river. Lin Yuan's sight was filled with the shadows of huge ships and sails. Such a scene was visually shocking. Whoosh! A sharp arrow pierced through the air at an extremely fast speed. In almost an instant, the small black dot had already arrived in front of Lin Yuan. The ice shield that easily blocked the first arrow didn't even manage to block it properly. It was torn apart by this small arrow and turned into a pile of ice shards that fell into the Wei River. Buzz! The stone arrowhead hit Lin Yuan's right shoulder. A majestic force rolled in. Lin Yuan, who was standing at the bow, didn't even have time to react before he was pushed to the stern by this force. If he hadn't hooked the boat with his foot in time, this arrow alone would have knocked him off the boat. But even so, the boat that was hooked by Lin Yuan's foot was pushed back thousands of meters and was almost pushed into the 4th checkpoint. He could vaguely hear the exclamations and laughter of the 4th Navy from time to time. It seemed that someone was betting on whether Lin Yuan could take the second arrow of Marshal Zhao. The defending general of the 4th checkpoint came to a ship near Lin Yuan and said in a deep voice, "Boy, our Navy's battle isn't the same as the one on land that can be won by morale and ferocity. Even if you have great abilities, you won't be able to use them in the water." The 5th checkpoint was set by Marshal Zhao himself. The condition to pass is very simple. As long as you can take 3 arrows of Marshal Zhao without falling off the boat, you pass. Speaking of this, he paused, as if he wanted to form a good relationship, and added, "According to the usual practice, the Marshal just now wanted to greet you, so he only used 20% of his strength at most. The next 2 arrows are 70% of his strength and 10% of his strength respectively. If you are ready, then row the boat forward. If you feel that you can't handle it, then go back home, lest you become a drowned rat." Although the rules were the same, it wasn't easy. If it was an ordinary Qing River Navy, judging from Lin Yuan's ability to easily pass the 1st checkpoint, not to mention the 5th checkpoint, even the 10th checkpoint wouldn't be able to stop him. But Lin Yuan was facing the victorious army, which was at the level of hell in the game. This was because the last obstacle in the battle against the victorious army was Zhao Xiang's unique archery skill, calm disturbance. It was said that this was a secret technique that Zhao Xiang had created in his early years when he had made a name for himself. Regardless of how the outside world praised it, in the eyes of the Qinjiang soldiers, Only those who could withstand the 3 arrows of petrifying wind were qualified to be called first class. However, after Zhao Xiang had created this secret technique, he had used it frequently. However, only 3 people had been able to withstand it. One was eunuch Tai of the Xinwu dynasty, one was the leader of the Qing River Navy, and the last one was Ning Tianxing. Over the years, there were countless sons of generals who wanted to join the victorious army as generals. But because the entrance examination of the victorious army was to take the secret skill of calm disturbance, only a few could pass. Although the one who used the bow was only Zhao Xiang's son, there were only a few who could pass the checkpoint. This time, the marshal personally drew the bow, and the power is naturally not comparable to the calm disturbance of the Zhao family's descendant. They saw with their own eyes the effect of forcing Lin Yuan to retreat nearly a kilometer with only 20% of the power. Got it. Lin Yuan nodded slightly and raised his eyebrows. His opponent's arrow was very fast. Even if Qin Yu used the special bow of the northern frontier, he could not achieve such a fast arrow. But the arrow just now only used 20% of his strength? Just how terrifying was the true strength of this general of the victorious army, whom Lei Qiusheng did not place in his eyes. Lin Yuan always felt that this world seemed to be controlled by the top forces, but the 7 subordinate dynasties did not seem to be soft persimmons. Just like Lei Qiusheng had the shadow beside him, and the Qing River Empire had Zhao Xiang, they all secretly hid extremely terrifying strength. It was just that they had not been forced to the point where they had to explode. Thinking of this, the corners of Lin Yuan's mouth curled up slightly. He murmured, "Let's see how strong your victorious duke is first." Lin Yuan's voice was very soft. Even the general who spoke to him before did not hear him. He only saw Lin Yuan lowering his head and murmuring a few words. Then, he steered the boat forward again. Further away, the second arrow of calm disturbance was shot out. The speed of this arrow was more than twice as fast as the previous one. Obviously, as the general said, Zhao Xiang's first arrow was just a greeting to Lin Yuan. Moreover, this arrow was not only extremely fast, but the timing of the shot was also perfect. It was shot right at the moment when Lin Yuan steered the boat forward. From afar, it looked like Lin Yuan was going to receive the arrow himself. In addition to the speed and timing, the angle was also quite tricky. Although there was a rule of not harming people's lives, this arrow went straight for Lin Yuan's lower abdomen. If hit by this arrow, even a Heaven Dipper realm cultivator would lose their ability to resist on the spot and be pushed off the skiff by the force of the arrow. Lin Yuan tilted his head. His long and narrow eyes narrowed, like a fox eyeing its prey. The greeting arrow just now was not easy to receive. The puppet made of various precious metals mixed with Lin Yuan's scales did not have the best defense in the world. However, any armor made of such materials could be called an invulnerable treasure armor. However, Zhao Xiang's arrow hit the right button. Until now, Lin Yuan could still feel that the joint of the right button had caved in and was unable to move freely. If such an injury fell on an ordinary person, even a cultivator with a strong constitution would probably lose an arm. Chapter 636. Zhao Xiang had indeed greeted him, but he did not care if the other party could accept his greeting. Lin Yuan did not know if Zhao Xiang had done it on purpose or if he had overestimated his strength, but from the injuries on the puppet's body, he could feel Zhao Xiang's strong malice. Even if he did not want to take his life with this arrow, he most likely wanted to cripple one of his hands. After all, it was a fact that he had forced Ning Tianxing to surrender in a one-on-one battle in the field that Ning Tianxing specialized in. As the current marshal of the victorious army, Zhao Xiang naturally did not wish for an existence that could threaten Ning Tianxing to appear in the ambitious northern frontier. Because if that happened, the navy that the Qing River Empire was so proud of could be crushed by the northern frontier at any time. How could they protect their country? If it was an official of another empire or a wanderer of the pugilistic world, Zhao Xiang might have extended an olive branch. However, after knowing that the other party came from the Northern Territory, a faction that had not been used in the past 2 years, since it was a land of desolation, Zhao Xiang knew that the Azure River Empire, which was considered weak even among the 7 empires, would definitely not attract the other party. Then, I'll return it to you. Lin Yuan's pitch-black eyes flashed, and his body rushed forward. He actually jumped up from the boat and took the initiative to meet the arrow. Lin Yuan's hands were in a strange posture. His movements were almost slow to the extreme, but he seemed to be deducing some kind of truth. However, the arrow, which was countless times faster than Lin Yuan's movements, was constantly rotating and struggling between Lin Yuan's hands. It was constantly rotating around Lin Yuan, who was suspended in the air. Tai Chi grasping Sparrow's tail. Although the martial technique that he had trained so hard in his previous life was executed in the posture of an ordinary person, it was just some kind of fist technique that was used to strengthen the body. However, the concept of Tai Chi was one of the highest martial techniques that Lin Yuan knew. Whether it was using speed to fight slow, or using strength to break a technique, it was obviously not just a little bit inferior to using 4 tails to pull 1,000 caddies. This fist technique was executed with the extraordinary interest of a cultivator, and the power that it could unleash was not something that an ordinary person could imagine. If it had to be categorized according to the Sky Martial Continent's rankings, Tai Chi Fist would definitely belong to the upper Earth grade or lower Heaven grade. Furthermore, it was the kind of terrifying martial technique that would not be weak when facing a weak opponent, but would be even stronger when facing a strong opponent. In a situation where there was no absolute difference in strength between the two, Lin Yuan couldn't think of anything that Tai Chi couldn't handle. Furthermore, the experience he had gained over 10 years of training in his previous life combined with the extraordinary quality of his puppet body allowed him to unleash the full power of Tai Chi. It was just that his right hand was still a little unnatural, so this grasping the bird's tail couldn't be considered beautiful. The arrow circled around Lin Yuan 4 times like a tamed beast, humming to express its submission. Only then did Lin Yuan slowly push it out with the Taiji stance. Suddenly, it burst out with a speed even more terrifying than before, heading straight for Zhao Xiang, who was at the bow of the ship. Tisk! The corner of Zhao Xiang's mouth twitched slightly, and he suddenly released the large bow that was fully drawn. The third arrow left the bowstring, but its target was no longer Lin Yuan, but the second arrow that was flying back. The 2 arrows collided in midair, and it was as if 2 peerless experts were attacking each other with all their strength on the Wei River. The arrow, which was made of ordinary material, instantly exploded into fine powder, and the aftershock of the explosion spread out in all directions. Both sides were affected at the same time, but Lin Yuan was only pushed back to his own small boat by the shockwave, taking 3 steps back. Every step he took caused the surrounding river to ripple, as if there were thunder exploding in the water, continuously producing muffled sounds. On the other hand, on Zhao Xiang's side, the situation was obviously not as ideal as Lin Yuan's. Zhao Xiang, who had drawn his bow, was unmoved. When the powerful shockwave hit him, his face sank, and he took a firm horse stance, stabilizing his figure and the ship he was on. However, the other ships were not so lucky. They were all pushed back by the terrifying shockwave, and the victorious 100 army soldiers on the edge of the ship fell into the Wei River one after another like dumplings. They were swept into the rolling river before they could even call for help. The victorious 100 army soldiers who had withstood the shockwave with great difficulty didn't even have time to count their losses before they shouted and put down their lifeboats, rowing the boats to save their comrades who had fallen into the water. When all the chaos finally subsided, someone cried out in surprise, expressing disbelief at what had just happened. The iron chain connecting the ship to the river seemed to be unable to withstand the powerful impact, and broke almost instantly. The other ships that had lost the iron chain were also pushed back by the impact. Except for the ship that Zhao Xiang was on, the other ships were all pushed back by more than 100 meters. If there was a comparison, it was undoubtedly more exaggerated that Zhao Xiang's arrow had forced Lin Yuan back by 1,000 meters. However, in terms of the actual effect, it was clear which ship was more important when compared to the hundreds of ships, especially the ship that Zhao Xiang was on. It stood majestically in the same place, forming a sharp contrast with the other ships that were retreating. This made many soldiers of the victorious 100 army feel a burning sensation on their faces. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that in the previous battle, it was obvious that the evil young man with a background had won. The younger generation will surpass us in time. Zhao Xiang, who was standing at the bow of the ship, withdrew his posture. His face was gloomy as he spat out these words one by one. Soon after, he waved his hand and walked directly to the cabin of the ship without looking at Lin Yuan's next move. When there was no one around, Zhao Xiang's face paled. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of black blood. His body swayed as if he would fall down at any moment. In the previous round of confrontation, he had indeed lost. However, he didn't lose in terms of strength, but in his haste to make a move that caused him to suffer a loss. Calm Disturbance was not a game of 20% strength, 70% strength, or 10% strength. Instead, it was similar to the technique of those cavalry generals. Each arrow was steadier and more powerful than the last. The third arrow was already an arrow that far exceeded his strength. However, in order to shoot this arrow, he needed to have enough time to accumulate strength. Contrary to his expectations, Lin Yuan was not forced back by the second arrow. Instead, he used an evil method to shoot the second arrow back. This forced him to hastily shoot the third arrow. The moment he let go, he suffered a backlash from the secret technique and suffered heavy injuries. If not for his vigorous cultivation, he probably wouldn't have been able to hold on. He would have collapsed to the ground, dead on the spot, and would have to recuperate for a long time. However, the situation was urgent. Naturally, he couldn't just sit back and do nothing. Others didn't know how terrifying his second arrow was, but how could he not know? If he left it alone, this ship would probably collapse in an instant. Apart from himself, there wouldn't be a second person on the ship that would survive. Therefore, he had no choice but to take action despite the backlash. Chapter 637. If Lin Yuan was just an unaffiliated martial artist, he wouldn't have had to take this arrow and watch as the other party slaughtered the soldiers on the ship. Then, he could point out that the other party had broken the rules of clearing the level and directly detain Lin Yuan. Whether he was locked up in the Azure River Empire or killed on the spot, there wouldn't be any problems. However, Lin Yuan wasn't a lone wolf. Behind him stood the northern frontier, which even the top forces had to be wary of. Not to mention the identity of this brat in the northern frontier, the fact that he was able to be released by the Black Jiao when the Sky Demon army was about to attack the northern frontier was enough to prove that this brat was under the orders of the Black Jiao. For a hidden danger that could threaten the Azure River Empire, would he provoke the true hidden danger and lead the troops of the northern frontier to the Azure River Empire? Naturally, Zhao Xiang knew how to answer such a simple multiple-choice question. Therefore, he chose to use his own hands as the price to settle this matter. It could also be considered as paying the price for his evil thoughts when he wanted to kill this talent from the northern frontier. After Zhao Xiang left, the rest of the victorious army naturally would not offend Lin Yuan without Zhao Xiang's permission out of fear. The helmsman controlled the ships and made way for Lin Yuan to pass through a waterway that was large enough for the skiff to pass through. I hope that the next time I come back, you can still maintain your current spirit. When passing by Zhao Xiang's ship, Lin Yuan lightly knocked on the ship's wall with a sinister smile on his face. Who was the best spy in the world? The people from the Seven Empires might have different opinions, but to Lin Yuan, this question wasn't worth thinking about. Even if it was Yi Bus-ho and the embroidered uniform guards selected by the system, they could only stand at the top of the food chain of spies in this world, and they weren't the only ones. The most powerful spies would always be those invisible and formless heavenly demons. When they weren't bound by their physical bodies, although they couldn't affect anything, they could use the identity of a bystander to witness everything that happened in any corner of the world. No matter how tight the seal was, it couldn't stop the invisible sky demon. The victorious army couldn't see it, but that didn't mean that Lin Yuan couldn't see it. When he took the ship south, there were countless sky demon following behind his ship. Therefore, everything that happened here was clearly seen by the sky demons. Ordinary soldiers didn't know that Zhao Xiang was injured, but Lin Yuan and the sky demon knew. Soon, the sky demon army was like a shark that smelled blood, crazily converging towards the south. Because their current strength wasn't enough to compete with the northern frontier, they needed more physical bodies to release more companions to increase their combat strength. Under the situation that the northern frontier couldn't be breached and they couldn't leave the Shenwu dynasty's territory, the rebel army in the south was naturally the best choice. In the past, the rebel army in the south had the support of the victorious army and the Xinjiang Navy, so it was naturally more than enough to resist the sky demon. But now? Zhao Xiang was injured, and the victorious army's morale was affected. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Even if the Xinjiang dynasty wouldn't shrink their defense line and defend their territory, they definitely wouldn't be able to support the rebel army in the south as much as before. Those who planned before taking action were not necessarily wise, but those who rationally analyzed the current situation and led the situation in a direction that was beneficial to them were definitely worthy of being called wise. On the other side, Ning Tianxing put his hands behind his back, and the red bell at his waist gently shook. The incorporeal sky demon were like small fish that were sucked into a whirlpool without any resistance. They were easily sucked into the sound of the bell, and became absent-minded, slowly gathering towards Ning Tianxing. The victorious army behind Ning Tianxing hurriedly followed Ning Tianxing's instructions, stuffing the sky demon into the magic sealing bottle one by one, waiting for Ning Tianxing's next command. That guy, is he really not a sky demon? Ning Tianxing's eyes narrowed slightly, and his hands kept pointing at the areas where the sky demon was as he muttered to himself. Previously, Lin Yuan's demonic aura was covering up, so he couldn't sense the sky demon's invasion at all. However, after Lin Yuan left, he was shocked to realize that there were at least 100 sky demons following Lin Yuan. Even though he tried his best to stop them, it was still a drop in the bucket, because he didn't know how many sky demons had entered the deeper areas under Lin Yuan's cover. After thinking carefully for a moment, Ning Tianxing's expression suddenly changed, and he cursed angrily. What a great diversion! After figuring out some of the key points, Ning Tianxing didn't care about continuing to capture the sky demon. He waved his hand to summon a guard and said in a deep voice, "Go and prepare a warship. I have something important to do, and I have to see foster father immediately." But the guard opened his mouth, and there was a hesitant expression on his face. Ning Tianxing had a special ability to sense the existence of the sky demon, and with the artifacts on him, he could easily capture the sky demon. When he returned, he could send these magic sealing bottles filled with sky demon to the members of the top forces, and he could immediately exchange them for a large amount of rewards. Therefore, even if he had to disobey Ning Tianxing once, he didn't want to cut off everyone's source of income. I know what you are thinking, but now, put away your greed and do as I say. Ning Tianxing grabbed the guard's collar and said with a gloomy face, "This matter concerns the survival of the Azure River Empire. If you make a mistake, even if I let you go, the Azure River Imperial family and Marshal Zhao won't let you go." "Yes, I will go and prepare." The guard was one. 9 meters tall, but in front of Ning Tianxing's strength, he was like a child who hadn't grown up. He was easily picked up by Ning Tianxing with one hand, and he didn't even have the slightest room to resist. He could only agree with a red face. After letting go of the guard, Ning Tianxing patted his cheek and cursed, "Motherf asterisk cur, Black Jiao, I knew you would play tricks. No wonder you dared to make a bet. So you wanted to let the sky demon consume our strength first, and then reap the benefits? Don't let me see you again. Motherf asterisk cur, scheming against me." After cursing and venting a bit, Ning Tianxing walked towards the stern of the ship. A boat was quickly lowered by the soldiers on the ship. Even with the sky demon scurrying around, these ordinary soldiers didn't dare to be dissatisfied with Ning Tianxing's orders in the slightest. His ferocity was evident. Ning Tianxing slightly nodded and stepped onto the boat. He turned his head and roared, "What the F*** are you standing there for? There are sky demon everywhere. Even if you run around with the magic sealing bottles, you can still catch a dozen. What are you looking at me for? Can you get rich looking at me? F***ck." After he finished speaking, the surrounding victorious army looked at each other in dismay. After a moment of silence, they actually ran around with the magic sealing bottles. Chapter 638. Time passed by slowly. Lin Yuan sat in the boat, drifting on the endless sea for more than half a month. He had never been out to sea in his previous life, nor did he learn how to use the stars to determine the direction. After less than 3 days out to sea, Lin Yuan was completely at a loss after losing all his references. He didn't even know where he was now. Moreover, the surrounding sea was beyond his imagination. Even if there were life forms, they were just ordinary sea creatures. He couldn't even catch a demon beast to ask for directions. Although the moist and salty sea breeze made him feel at ease as a water flood dragon, this kind of aimless drifting made Lin Yuan inexplicably irritated. As for letting Ao Qian lead the way, that was obviously not in Lin Yuan's interest. Whether it was the blood feud in his previous life or the endless trouble caused by his kindness this time, Lin Yuan liked to have the greatest malice towards those who existed other than himself when he was thinking. The Dragon Palace of the Four Seas was not the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas that Lin Yuan knew in his previous life. Even if they were still tyrannical in the Tianwu continent and easily stood at the top of the food chain as an outsider, they still couldn't escape the incomparable nature of the Tianwu continent and the untainted world. Compared to those in the legends, it was an insult to call the Dragon Clan here trash. Who would have thought that the infamous Dragon Palace of the Four Seas didn't even have a few pure-blooded true dragons? In front of Lin Yuan, who grew from an ordinary black snake to a pure-blooded water flood dragon, if the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas was not interested in the methods to purify the bloodline or awaken the bloodline, Lin Yuan would rather believe that a pie would fall from the sky. Therefore, when he had to go to the Endless Sea to meet the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas, Lin Yuan had to have Ao Qian firmly in his hands. At least he could ensure that when the two sides fell out, he had enough bargaining chips in his hands to negotiate with the other side. Although this premise had to be based on the premise that Ao Qian was indeed the descendant of some big shot in the Dragon Palace, at least he would have some confidence to reject the excessive request of the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas. He did not dare to say that he could run amok in the Endless Sea, but if the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas wanted to take advantage of him, they would have to think twice. However, if he let Ao Qian out, he, as a foreign demon beast, would be nothing more than a toy that the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas could do whatever they wanted. He wouldn't even be qualified to say no. Suddenly, Lin Yuan, who was sitting on the boat, stood up. His dark eyes flashed as he said in a deep voice, "Friends in front, since you're already here, why don't you come up and have a chat?" As the voice fell, the sea in front of Lin Yuan slightly fluctuated. A monster with a fish head, a human body, and a snake tail slowly splashed water. Although its dark green skin was rare, it was not as eye-catching as its muscles that contained explosive power. It also held a brass trident in its hand. Its appearance was very similar to the Naga that often appeared in movies and games in Lin Yuan's previous life. Lin Yuan and the Naga looked at each other in dismay. The Naga was silent for a moment, then silently turned around. Obviously, it had no intention to talk to Lin Yuan. It was as if it appeared only because Lin Yuan called it, and it showed its face out of politeness. You don't plan to say anything?" Lin Yuan was dumbfounded as he looked at the Naga that was about to leave. He could not stay silent any longer. The Naga turned its face, and with an extremely disdainful tone, it skillfully spat out the common language of the Sky Martial Continent. "Should I say, the Endless Sea is a forbidden area for humans, and if you don't get lost, I will kill you?" Lin Yuan's eyes widened as he looked at the Naga in front of him in disbelief. This guy, did he also transmigrate and reborn? Logically speaking, when the demonic beasts in the sea saw humans, they would usually shout out like this before they died. Hearing Lin Yuan's doubtful voice, the Naga looked at Lin Yuan meaningfully, casually stabbed the brass trident into the sea beside it, and it actually stood on the spot as if it was stabbing into the ground. Then, it cupped its fists and said, "I can't beat you, sorry to disturb you, goodbye." Lin Yuan. After confirming with his eyes, this guy really transmigrated. The Naga jumped, like a sea snake entering the water, but it only made a jumping action, and that somewhat funny fish head crashed into a piece of solidified ice. It wanted to use its strong arms to support itself on the ice to stand up, but it kept sliding on the ice, like a salted fish that had come ashore. "What the hell are you trying to do?" After dozens of attempts to stand up, the Naga finally could not endure it any longer. It lay down on the ice as if it had accepted its fate, and weakly roared at Lin Yuan. "How do I get to the West Sea Dragon Palace?" Lin Yuan tilted his head, and resisted the urge to laugh at the other party's salted fish flopping around. Even though he did not know what was going on with the Sky Martial Continent's chaotic geographical names. Those who had a little understanding of the Sky Martial Continent would know that the Hengduan mountain range was located in the center of the Sky Martial Continent, and the Endless Sea was the sea that Lin Yuan had only entered after he had kept going south. No matter how he thought about it, it should be called the South Sea Dragon Palace. However, whether it was Ao Qian or other existences, it seemed that no one questioned the name of the West Sea Dragon Palace. The Naga sighed and said, "You can just float forward like this. When you see a dragon bloodline demonic beast, it means that you have reached the territory of the West Sea Dragon Palace. This is still the Outer Sea, and the West Sea Dragon Palace does not care about the barren resources and land here. Us demonic beasts from the Outer Sea will not be able to come into contact with the Dragon Palace's species, much less know the location of the West Sea Dragon Palace. So, you are just wasting your breath trying to stop me, why bother? Why don't we just pretend that we have never seen each other?" Lin Yuan was speechless. He had never thought that the speed of the boat could reach at least 2,000 kilometers per hour. Such a speed in his previous life was already at the level of a fighter jet. However, after maintaining this speed for half a month, he was still in the outer sea of the Endless Sea? Was it because he did not recognize the direction clearly, so when he was rushing, he deviated from the route and went in circles? Or was the Endless Sea really unimaginably vast, and was it really worthy of the word endless? "You seem to be very afraid of me, but also not afraid of me. Why?" Lin Yuan asked in confusion. This Naga did not seem to be willing to have any conflict with him, but intentionally or unintentionally, it revealed a kind of contempt towards Lin Yuan. It seemed that letting Lin Yuan continue to wander in the outer sea would not affect these demonic beasts at all. A big trouble had appeared in front of them, but they did not seem to care about it at all? This was very contradictory and also very difficult to understand. However, Lin Yuan was very interested in the way the demonic beasts thought. Chapter 639. I admit that I am not your opponent. If you have a head-on conflict with me, I will be the one to die in the end. Naga seemed to have adapted to the environment on the ice. She coiled her snake tail in a strange posture as if she was sitting on the ice. Then she slowly opened her hands to Lin Yuan and continued, "But in the end, you are just a human being. The ocean environment is not suitable for your survival. You need water and food, and you can't get any of these from the ocean, right?" Lin Yuan nodded slightly and did not comment on Naga's opinion. Naga still opened her hands and said indifferently, "Powerful humans like you are not rare in the outer sea. The outer sea monsters have no ability to deal with powerful invaders like you, but they can eliminate you in another way. For example, they can turn a blind eye to your existence and watch you starve to death because of the lack of supplies. It's that simple." Hearing Naga's explanation, Lin Yuan suddenly understood why the humans in this world did not care about the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas. No matter how powerful the demonic beasts on land were, it was impossible for humans to be helpless against them. Humans had countless ways to kill them, because humans were also a species that belonged to the earth. In the same environment, humans could use their stronger adaptability and learning ability to defeat all opponents that they could not defeat in their eyes. But the ocean was different. Especially the endless sea, which was almost endless. The sea near the Tianwu continent was still okay. At least there were some islands to stop at and get fruits, meat, and fresh water. There were also humans who set up camps there and nibbled away the territories of the sea monsters bit by bit. But those places were not worth mentioning in the endless sea. Not to mention the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas, even the outer sea monsters looked down on such territories. But even in this sea area that was occupied by humans, human merchant ships only dared to sail close to the mainland. Moreover, they could be attacked by the sea monsters at any time and be dragged to the bottom of the sea to become a delicious meal for the sea monsters. According to the territorial division in Naga's mouth, the sea area where Lin Yuan was currently located without any reference was the real existence of the outer sea. The islands and sea areas occupied by humans, although equally vast, could only be regarded as a coastal existence. Except for the sea monsters who wanted to change their taste, there were no monsters living there. Were the powerful humans ambitious enough to leave the coastal areas and use their own strength to conquer the outer seas, or even the deep sea? Perhaps the demon beasts in the outer sea were no match for these human beings, but they could choose to deal with them coldly. They could let these human beings wander freely on the ocean, or they could use their talents or powers to interfere with the sea, causing the human fleets to be completely lost in the endless sea. When these human fleets ran out of supplies, they would naturally be eliminated. In Lin Yuan's previous life, in a world where there were no demon beasts, humans had spent hundreds and thousands of years to develop abilities like star grasping, sea route maps, and so on that allowed them to determine their position on the ocean. However, they could only run on fixed routes. The unknown sea was still fatal to them. Furthermore, this was a world where demonic beasts existed? Among the humans on the Tianwu continent, only the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas, a powerful demonic beast force, had bared its ferocious fangs to the humans on the coast. Without experienced captains and sailors, any human who dared to leave the coastal areas would either be cruelly slaughtered by the demon beasts, or forever lost in the endless sea. In such a big environment, not to mention conquering the ocean, even uncovering the mysterious veil of the ocean was just a joke. What a pity, I won't starve to death, and I won't die of thirst. Lin Yuan gently shook his head, his black eyes revealing a trace of ridicule. He said in a deep voice, "Do you really think that an existence that doesn't even need to breathe will die in the endless sea because of the reason you imagined?" Speaking until here, Lin Yuan gently snapped his fingers. The ice that had been adapted to by the Naga suddenly changed. Pieces of ice formed shackles that bound the Naga. No matter how hard it struggled, it couldn't shake the shackles in the slightest. With another snap of his fingers, the Naga's frantic struggle instantly stopped. This was because it felt that sharp icicles had appeared inside the shackles, easily piercing through its hard shell and deeply piercing into its flesh. A large amount of dark red blood flowed out, but it was instantly assimilated by the shackles, turning into blood-red ice. Then, what's your name? Lin Yuan slightly raised his eyebrows. His voice became hoarse and low. The tyrant song of the world and dragons might erupted at the same time, causing Lin Yuan's voice to emit a strange magic, making people unconsciously immerse themselves in his voice. Finn Barton, the most outstanding warrior of the Barton family. The Naga tried to resist, its pupils shaking violently. However, under Lin Yuan's full power skills, all of its resistance was like a joke. Whether it was its body or spirit, it was imprisoned by Lin Yuan in an instant. Before Lin Yuan could break this imprisonment, it was like a fish on a chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered by Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan's expression did not change in the slightest when he heard the Naga's name that was similar to a Westerner's in his previous life. In any case, the Naga's appearance was already sufficiently westernized. However, this so-called family made Lin Yuan quite interested. The humans of the Sky Martial Continent had their own surnames, but the demonic beasts did not. Even the mountain-shaking apes, a tribe in the periphery of the Hengduan mountain range, only had a name other than Gravel as the name of the tribe. However, this Naga, a demonic beast from the outer sea, had its own surname. Obviously, the demonic beasts of the sea had already given birth to their own social structure. The appearance of a surname signified the appearance of a social class. Commoners and slaves only had a name, and those who had a surname were basically nobles. The powerful nobles stood at the top of this social structure. However, the demonic beasts of the Hengduan mountain range did not have such a division. In their eyes, other than the Beast King, the rest of the demonic beasts were no different to them. Even the Beast King did not have a surname. Other than themselves, whether it was humans or other demonic beasts, they would only call them by their tribe's name. Is this part of the sea the territory of the Barton family? Lin Yuan stared at the Naga in front of him and asked in a deep voice. Yes, this part of the sea is the hunting ground of the Barton family. The demonic beasts that live in this part of the sea are either loyal to the Barton family or become the Barton family's slaves and food storage. Finn was imprisoned on the ice block, but he still nodded. Chapter 640. Are there many factions like the Barton clan in the outer seas? Lin Yuan once again threw out a question. It was just like how the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas wanted to recruit Lin Yuan to set foot in the northern frontier or the Hengduan mountain range. Even if both sides were demonic beasts, it didn't mean that they were good brothers who worked together. There were still some differences between them. Just like Ning Tianxing, who was planted in the Xinjiang Empire, the ocean demonic beasts had been drooling over the Tianwu continent for a long time. But now, it seemed that the ocean demonic beasts weren't that united. Just like how the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas looked down on the ocean demonic beasts, the ocean demonic beasts were also looked down on by the dragon bloodline demonic beasts. The ocean demonic beasts were clearly divided into two camps. Under such conditions, if the benefits were right, it wasn't impossible to establish their own faction in the ocean demonic beast. Even if they couldn't establish their own faction, they could still use the ocean demonic beasts as pawns. When necessary, they could use them to fight against the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas. How is that possible? The Great Barton clan is one of a kind. Hearing Lin Yuan's question, Finn seemed to have been insulted. He actually ignored the pain and restraint and started to struggle madly on the ice shackles again. It seemed that he wanted to beat up Lin Yuan for asking this question to vent his anger. Lin Yuan pursed his lips. It seemed that this Barton clan was really similar to the Western clans of the Middle Ages in his previous life. They were arrogant, conceited, and brainless. They all thought that they were heroic knights and valued their clan's honor more than anything else. A simple conflict could even lead to a family feud that could last for hundreds of years. The Barton clan is so powerful. How could you not know where the Dragon Palace of the West Sea is? Lin Yuan's black eyes turned. He sneered and said, "Aren't you the most outstanding warrior of the Barton clan? Or are you just bragging to me, and the truth isn't like that?" When his voice fell, Finn was like a deflated balloon. He stopped struggling madly and said helplessly, "You damned outsider. All right, I admit that the Barton clan isn't the only useless existence. In the ocean demonic beasts, there are countless clans of various sizes. The Barton clan is just an ordinary clan." At this point, Finn Barton raised his comical and ugly fish head and said seriously, "But I, Finn Barton, am truly the most outstanding warrior of the Barton family." Lin Yuan was speechless. It was just as he expected. The Naga was just a demonic beast. And the Naga he caught was just a demonic beast clan demonic beast. But this Naga demonic beast was demonic beast was demonic beast demonic beast. If the Barton family was truly a unique existence, then either Finn had overestimated himself, or the strength of the sea monsters was pitifully weak, especially those that lived in the outer seas. Moreover, in a territory that was even vaster than the Hengduan Mountains, how could there be a force that could dictate everything? Even the demonic beasts in the Hengduan mountain range would not treat the demonic beast imperial court as a serious matter. The demonic beast kings and their clans all preferred to fight for themselves before they encountered a situation that they could not resolve. However, this Naga was definitely a weirdo. Under the combination of dragon's might and world tyrant Sing, it was still able to brag without batting an eyelid. This meant that even it believed its own lies. Otherwise, it wouldn't be able to say such things in its current state. "You don't seem to have grasped the main point in my words." Lin Yuan tilted his head and said slowly, "I'm asking you if you know the way to the West Sea Dragon Palace, not how powerful the Barton family is or how powerful you are. Remember your current identity, you are just my captive." Finn was like a frosted eggplant. It lowered its head helplessly and said in a deep voice, "I'm serious. If you continue to float forward, you will reach the territory of the West Sea Dragon Palace. There are many dragon blood demonic beasts there, and they are different from the outer seas. They are very resistant to outsiders entering the territory of the West Sea Dragon Palace. Once they discover your existence, they will immediately appear." "So, you have no value?" Lin Yuan raised his eyebrows again. His expression was not very good. No matter what, Finn was considered a noble among the sea monsters. Even if the strength of this noble force was very weak, it should still have a certain degree of understanding of the endless sea. However, it now said that it did not know the location of the West Sea Dragon Palace. This meant that the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas had a very strong control over the endless sea. These noble demonic beasts in the outer seas did not even have the qualifications to enter the territory of the Dragon Palace. Lin Yuan was once again vigilant and nervous about the unknown future. At this stage, provoking an existence like the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas did not seem to be the right decision. Hearing the murderous intent in Lin Yuan's words, Finn seemed to have sobered up in time. It immediately shook its head and said loudly, "No, you have to believe that I still have value. Although the Barton family is just an ordinary family, they definitely have rich reserves. Whether you want deep-sea minerals or underwater spiritual items, I can get them for you. You name a price, and I will pay my own ransom." Lin Yuan was speechless. He still felt that this guy seemed to have transmigrated. This guy seemed to be very familiar with kidnapping and extortion. However, Lin Yuan had never heard of any news of human fleets returning from the endless sea. He also did not know if the sea monsters had made deals with human forces, for example, letting humans exchange spiritual items and minerals for humans lost at sea. Lin Yuan shook his head and said expressionlessly, I said that I only want to know the location of the West Sea Dragon Palace. The minerals and spiritual items you mentioned are of no value to me. I will count to 3. If you still can't give me a satisfactory answer, I will. As the saying went, every snake had its own way. The Dragon Palace of the Four Seas had a very strong control over the Endless Sea. However, Lin Yuan still did not believe that these demonic beasts in the outer seas did not even know how to go to the deep sea. This Finn most likely knew something, but it was just unwilling to tell him. Furthermore, it was the kind of resistance that came from the soul that made it refuse to answer Lin Yuan's question under such circumstances. Even during the conversation, it was thinking of ways to change the topic and avoid all questions about the West Sea Dragon Palace. Wait. Finn's throat wriggled in pain. He gritted his teeth and said, I do not know the location of the West Sea Dragon Palace, but I know that there is a demonic beast that knows how to answer your question. Chapter 641. Lin Yuan snorted with a gloomy face. It's true. There are many demonic beasts in the outer sea, but none of them have the blood of the dragon tribe. It is said that all the demonic beasts who have awakened the blood of the dragon tribe will be taken to the deep sea and trained by the Dragon Palace. Even the demonic beasts with a low level of awakening will become soldiers who patrol the sea for the Dragon Palace. Therefore, the difference between the demonic beasts in the outer sea and the demonic beasts in the inner sea is whether they have the blood of the dragon tribe or not. But I heard that there are evil dragons in the dragon tribe, which refers to the demonic beasts with the blood of the dragon tribe who have violated the commandments of the dragon tribe. The stronger demonic beasts will be imprisoned in the deep sea prison of the endless sea, where they will be retrained and re-educated, waiting for the dragon tribe's judgment. The weaker demonic beasts will be killed on the spot. In fact, there are many demonic beasts with the blood of the dragon tribe in the outer sea. They all escaped from the prison at the bottom of the sea. In the early years, the Dragon Palace might send demonic beasts to capture them. But in recent decades there have been many terrifying demonic beasts in the outer sea, and they even have the potential to compete with the Dragon Palace. Now, the Dragon Palace did not allow the demonic beasts in the outer sea to enter the deep sea, and the demonic beasts in the outer sea would not casually let the members of the Dragon Palace in the outer sea. There were more and more conflicts between the demonic beasts and the outer sea, and a full-scale war could break out at any time. Among the evil dragons that escaped, a considerable number of them stayed in the outer sea. Some of them lived in seclusion, and some of them became leaders of the demonic beasts in the outer sea. If you ask me where the Dragon Palace in the West Sea is, I can't answer you. With my strength, I dare to enter the deep sea. Once I am discovered by the demonic beasts with the blood of the dragon tribe, I will die. I don't even have the courage to go near the Dragon Palace, let alone explore it. Finn struggled and said, but in the territory of the Barton family, there is an evil dragon that lives in seclusion. Although I am not familiar with it, the Barton family has some friendship with it. If you have the courage, I can take you to it. Hearing Finn's words, Lin Yuan's eyelids drooped. It seemed that it was just as he had expected. Although the overall strength of the demon beasts in the outer sea was not as strong as the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas, it was not difficult for such a huge territory to raise a few great demon beasts that could compete with the dragon experts. The two sides rejected each other and formed their own system. Sooner or later, a conflict would erupt. No wonder the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas had not only started to set foot on the land but also recruited the dragon blood demon beasts scattered on the land. After Lin Yuan demonstrated his ability to purify the dragon blood, they even settled Ao Qian in the northern frontier and gave up the evil cult to help Lin Yuan complete his plan to disrupt the southern part of the Shenwu dynasty. For a race that valued bloodline like the dragons, be it the cultists or the monsters from the outer seas, they were never their own people. They showed kindness to Lin Yuan not only because Lin Yuan had the ability to purify bloodlines, but also because Lin Yuan had the bloodline of the dragons. Therefore, they did not care about Lin Yuan's opinion and classified Lin Yuan as part of the dragon's system. However, such words were just pleasing to the ears. To put it bluntly, except for the descendants of the dragons of the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas, no matter if it was the subordinates of the Dragon Palace or a foreign dragon blood demon beast like Lin Yuan, in their eyes, they were nothing but cannon fodder in a war that could break out at any time. They lured Lin Yuan into the sea because the demon beasts in the outer seas had begun to compete with the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas. Lead the way. Lin Yuan waved his hand, and the ice shackles that bound Finn instantly melted. However, with the strong physique of a demon beast, Finn would not faint from excessive bleeding. The moment the shackles melted, the wounds on his body began to wriggle and heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. Finn looked at Lin Yuan meaningfully. Without saying anything, he turned around and jumped into the sea. Lin Yuan took a step out of the skiff and followed closely behind Finn, piercing into the sea like a sharp arrow. Puppets did not need to breathe or eat, and with the triple protection of Lin Yuan's divine sense, the Eye of God, and the system's scanning, even though Finn dived deeper and deeper, Lin Yuan could clearly see the surrounding environment. After sinking for more than 10,000 meters, Lin Yuan gradually felt some pressure from the surrounding undercurrent. He raised his head to look at Finn, who was leading the way, and saw a painful expression on Finn's face. Obviously, this level of water pressure was not something a demon beast of his level could easily withstand. However, Finn did not turn his head to look at Lin Yuan's movements. Obviously, he was not playing tricks. With this guy's cowardly personality, it was impossible for him to bring Lin Yuan into the deep sea, because if he did that, he would be the first to collapse under the pressure. The best way to die would be to explode and die. The ocean was a magical place. The most basic way to distinguish the strength of sea creatures was to keep diving. The deeper the sea creature dived, the stronger the sea creature was. Because there were undercurrents and water pressure at the bottom of the sea, most creatures' bodies could not withstand the water pressure at the bottom of the sea. Even the dragons, who were the overlords of the sea, had to use demonic power to protect their bodies. Otherwise, they would also be crushed. Otherwise, they would not lock the evil dragon to the bottom of the sea as a punishment. As he dived deeper and deeper, Lin Yuan also saw more and more sea creatures. However, most of the sea creatures just looked at Lin Yuan curiously and did not have the intention to provoke him. Not to mention that the dragon aura that Lin Yuan emitted from time to time was enough to make these sea creatures, whose average strength was in the wisdom state, revere him. Just the fact that he kept diving into the deep sea was enough to make these sea creatures lose interest in provoking Lin Yuan. However, no matter how much this guy looked like a human, he was definitely not. No human dared to enter the endless outer sea casually, and no human dared to dive into the endless outer sea, because human respiratory organs could not absorb the oxygen in the sea, and their lung capacity was not enough to support them to swim freely in the sea. If a human went into the sea, they would mostly rely on their own true chi and earth energy to force the surrounding water away. However, they only dared to move in the sea at a depth of a few hundred meters. Finn, there are more and more sea creatures around. Lin Yuan opened his mouth to speak without any fear. The ability of the King of Water made the sea water obediently avoid Lin Yuan's mouth, and did not muffle his voice. They don't dare to come and cause trouble. Finn did not even turn his head. Even his voice was weak. It seemed that this deep dive had already exhausted him. Lin Yuan nodded and did not comment on Finn's words. Although he did not know why, he always felt that these sea creatures seemed to be more sensible than the land creatures. If it were the land creatures, their first reaction would be to fight to the death when they saw an unknown creature invading their territory. Chapter 642. Lin Yuan didn't get the answer to this question until he saw a giant sea monster pass by. The sea beast didn't do anything. It just swam gently in the sea near Lin Yuan and swallowed a large number of small sea beasts and even demonic beasts within a breath. Obviously, these small sea beasts couldn't hurt the giant sea beast with their own strength. They could only be digested and excreted by the giant sea beast. So obviously, it wasn't that the sea monsters didn't like to fight. They didn't want to provoke Lin Yuan. They just knew how to adapt to the situation. The environment here was so harsh that it was far beyond the imagination of the creatures on land. Even if they were just hurrying on a journey, they might be swallowed by the giant sea beasts passing by. Even struggling and escaping was a luxury. Natural selection, survival of the fittest. This was the eternal law of nature. Demonic beasts on the land circled their own territories and didn't allow any creatures to offend their dignity because those who were qualified to own territories were the top predators. But for the sea monsters, territory was just a general concept. In this environment, it was impossible to avoid the tragedy of the big fish eating the small fish. When disaster came, they couldn't even escape. If they wanted to survive, they had to be smart and alert. Go down for another 30,000 meters, and you will see a sunken ship. The evil dragon I mentioned lives in that sunken ship. Finn paused and Lin Yuan, who was following behind him, almost hit his back. Fortunately, even in the deep sea, Lin Yuan's reflexes didn't weaken and he braked in time. At this time, Finn turned his head and looked at Lin Yuan. His originally green skin had a strange purple-red color. It could be seen that this guy had reached his limit. If he continued to dive, the water pressure would be enough to kill him. You want to run? Lin Yuan's eyes narrowed and a fierce aura burst out, instantly locking onto Finn in front of him. Finn helplessly spread out his hands and said bitterly, "Boss, what I said is true. There is a hidden evil dragon living in the sunken ship below. It must know what you want to know. If you have any questions, just ask it directly. I really can't go down. If I continue to dive, I will definitely die without a complete corpse." Lin Yuan tilted his head and sneered. "Why should I believe you? You are not telling the truth at all. You can't even go down, and you say you are friends with it? How do I know that it is an evil dragon in the sunken ship, and not a fatal trap? I swear on the honor of the Barton family that what I said is true. If there is even half a lie, I will die a horrible death." Finn's face turned red and he growled, "You can see me now. If I continue to dive down, I will definitely die. You go down and find that evil dragon, I will wait here. This is the hunting ground of the Barton family." "I will believe you this time." Lin Yuan took a deep look at Finn and said coldly, "No matter if it is a fatal trap or not, I will still go down. If you lead me to a trap, then you better pray that I will really die in there. Otherwise, even if you escape to the ends of the earth, I will still have a way to find you." Finn saw that Lin Yuan was no longer forcing him to continue diving when he said this. He clearly let out a sigh of relief. Lin Yuan looked at Finn's gradually relaxed expression and said faintly, "Also, when I enter the sunken ship, you better stay here. If I find out that you want to sneak away, I don't think you want to know what will happen to you." As soon as he finished speaking, Lin Yuan had already turned into a black arrow and plunged into the sunken ship. Finn curled his lips and subconsciously wanted to float up. However, before he could do anything, a cold breath stuck to the place 4 inches above his navel. That was the vital part of their race. Once it was injured, even the almighty immortals would not be able to save him. Finn shivered. Lin Yuan's threat was still echoing in his ears. He sighed helplessly and could only continue to endure the water pressure around him. He had already reached the limit of his endurance and silently waited for Lin Yuan to come out of the sunken ship or die in it. He did not deceive Lin Yuan. There was indeed an evil dragon living in the sunken ship. Moreover, its status in the Dragon Palace was not low. It was only later that it violated some rules and was classified as an evil dragon by the Dragon Palace. It was said that this guy had been imprisoned in the underwater prison for nearly 1,000 years and had long become a complete madman. Although it later escaped from the underwater prison and successfully avoided the guards of the West Sea Dragon Palace and came to the open sea, this guy's brain was not very good. It looked normal, but from time to time, crazy ideas would pop up. Moreover, it was the kind of madness that would not even care about its own life in order to achieve its goal. Over the years, many monsters had entered the sunken ship, but only a few had come out alive. And even if they could escape from the hands of the mad dragon, they would basically end up with injuries all over their bodies. He did not think that this outsider was a match for the mad dragon, but just in case, he would not leave this sea area until he was sure that Lin Yuan was dead. After all, this guy was too strange. So strange that Finn actually faintly felt that the mad dragon might not be able to do anything to Lin Yuan. On the other side, Lin Yuan, who had entered the sunken ship, only gave Finn a warning before he felt a sense of weightlessness. Only then did he clench his teeth and reach out to pat the beast pouch at his waist before he completely lost consciousness and released his original body. The next moment, the divine sense dissipated and was directly sent out by the puppet body, returning to Lin Yuan's original body. The feeling of weightlessness dissipated instantly. Lin Yuan also began to turn his head and look around. A hint of surprise flashed through his heterochromatic vertical pupils. Previously, he didn't understand why a sin dragon would live in a sunken ship, just like how he didn't understand why a human ship would sink in this sea area. From the appearance of the sunken ship, the shipbuilding technology of this ship was at least 200 years behind the current Qing River Empire. However, 200 years ago, humans had never stepped out of the endless sea. Sea trade was all along the edges of the main road. They hadn't even stepped out of the coast area, let alone this open sea that was extremely mysterious to humans. It couldn't be that the ship was built by the sea demonic beasts, right? It was not until after entering the sunken ship that Lin Yuan discovered that the interior of this sunken ship was actually an independent Sumeru space. Chapter 643. This Sumeru space was not big. Whether it was the secret realm under the strange lake or the tomb the fire Kirin gave him, it was far bigger than the Sumeru space inside the sunken ship. However, the spiritual energy here was extremely rich. In Lin Yuan's experience, other than his own nest, there was no other place with a richer spiritual energy. It could even be said that his nest was far inferior to this Sumeru space. There was not a drop of seawater here, but he could feel the sticky moisture under his feet. Obviously, the spiritual energy here had begun to liquefy. If the green leaf water lotus grew in such an environment, its growth rate would be greatly increased. Then there was the general structure of this Sumeru space. It seemed to be the interior of a ship, but unlike the sunken ship outside, which was full of all kinds of microorganisms and marine plants, this Sumeru space, which was similar to a cabin, was brand new. The construction style was similar to the British style. Just by looking at it, one could feel the luxurious and romantic atmosphere. What was even more frightening was that in this cabin-like shimmy world, there were all kinds of entertainment facilities, almost all of which existed in Lin Yuan's memory but should not appear in this world. Tables such as poker, baccarat, and so on could be seen everywhere. There were even billiard tables and slot machines. This ship did not seem to belong to this world. "Welcome, friend." A voice with a smile sounded, waking Lin Yuan up from his thoughts. Lin Yuan turned his head and looked in the direction of the figure. It was a gorgeous solid wood bar. A creature wearing a white shirt and a black vest stood behind the bar. The reason it was called a creature was because the guy who dressed like a bartender had the head of a snake, but there were 2 horns on his head. His body wasn't too exaggerated, just enough to support the shirt and vest on his body. However, the arms that stretched out from the sleeves weren't thick, but rather slender. The palm, made up of 3 sharp claws, was also different from the 5 nimble fingers of a human. It was an exaggeration to say that it looked like a human. It was also an exaggeration to say that it looked like a dragon. Freak. Lin Yuan could only comment on the creature standing behind the bar. The freak, dressed like a bartender, was carefully wiping a glass goblet with a snow-white towel. He didn't even look at Lin Yuan. He took the initiative to greet him, but he didn't intend to continue speaking. Lin Yuan was also silent for a moment. His gaze once again fell on the wine cabinet behind the freak. It was still some wine that should only appear in his memory. Just the ones he recognized were whiskey, brandy, Remy Martin, and so on. There were also various kinds of red wine and champagne neatly arranged. However, it was obvious that none of them were produced in the Tianwu continent. "You're very interesting." The freak stopped wiping the goblet. His golden eyes flashed and he said in a deep voice, "Although not many people have dared to enter my place in recent years, without exception, everyone who enters would ask me about the table, the props, and the wine behind me. But you didn't. On the contrary, you are very calm, as if you know these things." Lin Yuan didn't reply. He just wriggled his body and walked to the front of the bar. He said in a deep voice, "Although I don't know what you are, I'm very sorry. I don't have time to play house with you. I can see that you treasure these things very much. So, I think, you don't want me to break them in front of you, right? You're really interesting." The freak silently lowered his vertical pupils and smiled mysteriously. It had been a long time since he had met such an interesting customer. In the past, those who came here, whether they came here on their own or were tricked in, their first reaction was shock. Then, when they saw him, they would usually kneel down and beg for mercy, hoping to leave this place alive. Then, they would all become his meal. However, Lin Yuan just glanced at the general layout of the place indifferently and took the initiative to threaten his existence. This was the first time in decades. West Sea Dragon Palace. How do I get there? Lin Yuan raised his eyelids slightly. His gaze was somewhat gloomy. What would you like to drink? The freak smiled in response to Lin Yuan. I forgot to ask for your name. You can call me bartender because I don't remember my original name. West Sea Dragon Palace. How do I get there? Lin Yuan didn't want to waste time with the freak. He asked again with a sullen face. I can feel that you have a very pure dragon bloodline in your body. I think your father should be a true dragon. Your mother also belongs to the Dragon Palace with a more noble bloodline. It's very interesting that someone like you doesn't know how to get to the Dragon Palace. As if he couldn't see the coldness in Lin Yuan's eyes, the bartender still had a mysterious smile on his face. He said indifferently, although I do treasure the things here, I can see from your eyes that you know where this place is. So, even if you break the things here, I can easily restore them. You can't threaten me. Seeing Lin Yuan remain silent, the bartender slowly said, Every place has its own rules. I don't care where you come from. Since you want to get information from me, there are only 2 ways. Either you drink with me. If I get drunk first, I can tell you anything you want to know. But if you get drunk first, you'll be my dinner tonight. How about it? The moment the bartender's voice fell, Lin Yuan suddenly felt a chill crawl all over his body. It was as if an invisible grim reaper had quietly appeared behind him and was waving its scythe, ready to harvest his soul at any time. What about the other way? Lin Yuan glanced to the side and exhaled a turbid breath helplessly. The freak in front of him was very strong. Although he couldn't see through him, He could be sure from this Sumeru space that this guy was at least an existence in the desolate demon realm. In addition, he had the identity of the Sumeru space's master. Lin Yuan knew very well that he was most likely not a match for him. Especially in the opponent's territory, the chances of winning were undoubtedly smaller. Equivalent exchange. The bartender put the wine glass in his hand on the bar counter and said with a smile, "You ask me a question, and I'll ask you a question. If the answer you give doesn't satisfy me, or if the answers to the two questions are not equivalent, you will still become my dinner. It's that simple." Lin Yuan's lips squirmed as he silently cursed a few times. Then, he slowly said, "Drinking is not a problem, but how much do you think you have to make me drunk? As for equivalent exchange, I think you might have some misunderstanding about equivalent. I asked you the question of how to get to the West Sea Dragon Palace, but if you ask me what 1 + 1 equals, how should I answer so that the two answers have the same value?" Chapter 644. To me, the location of the Dragon Palace is a simple question. It's as simple as what you said about 1 + 1. Therefore, the answers to these two questions are equal. You just have to answer me truthfully. The bartender held the goblet in front of him and shook it gently. A glass of mellow red wine appeared in front of Lin Yuan. He still had an inexplicable smile on his face as he said in a deep voice, "As for the wine, don't worry. You can't play any tricks here. Whether it's you or me, once we drink enough, we'll naturally be drunk and unconscious. Methods to sober up won't work here. It's purely a competition of drinking capacity." "Why should I believe you?" Lin Yuan curled his lips. He was not a controlling person. Whether it was the Stoneclaw Forest or the northern frontier, he could rest assured that others would take care of them. As long as the situation was going in the direction he wanted, he could leave it all to others. However, he did not like the feeling of leaving everything to others. "Because you have no other choice but to believe me." The bartender slowly spread his hands and the smile on his face faded. In an instant, Lin Yuan felt as if an invisible hand was strangling his throat. It was as if the bartender only needed to think about it, and he would be obliterated on the spot without even having the chance to display his invincible combat power. Fortunately, this feeling only lasted for a moment. The inexplicable smile on the bartender's face appeared again. The invisible pressure also disappeared, as if it had never appeared before. Lin Yuan cursed silently in his heart again. The endless sea was obviously an extremely difficult dungeon for him now. It was definitely equivalent to a lunatic's dream to run amok with his laughable strength. Not to mention the true dragons hidden in the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas, even the bartender in front of him could easily erase his existence. "Then let's make a deal." Lin Yuan opened his big mouth and said in a deep voice, "However, this is a real deal. You can use anything in exchange for me to fulfill one of your wishes, but as you said, it must be fair. Your efforts must be proportional to your benefit. I can accept, including but not limited to, all kinds of secrets and everything I have seen and heard as bargaining chips to trade with you." "You're really different." The bartender said this for the third time. His golden eyes seemed to be smiling as he said, "Then, what can you exchange your life for?" "You won't be able to get anything." Lin Yuan shook his head and said expressionlessly. Not to mention that his life couldn't be used as a bargaining chip, but as long as he didn't leave this Sumeru space, even if his life was still in the other party's hands, this kind of trade obviously wouldn't work. Even if it could be done, Lin Yuan would still express his resistance. The bartender was silent for a moment. Then, with a strange smile on his face, he said, "Then I will use the control of this Sumeru world to exchange a path with you. Do you have a way to get me to the world where these things exist?" The bartender's mental state was obviously abnormal. At the very least, normal people wouldn't be able to understand his train of thought. Lin Yuan couldn't even imagine the connection between the two problems. However, without the unnecessary threats and nonsense, there was nothing to complain about. Lin Yuan was silent for a moment. He didn't get the system's affirmation, but he didn't get a rejection either. Then, he said in a low voice, "No, this bargaining chip isn't enough." The things in Sumer world existed in Lin Yuan's memory. However, it was obviously not unique to the world where he lived in his previous life. If it was in the past, Lin Yuan wouldn't have believed in those stories in novels and anime. However, now that he had personally come to another world, he was afraid that those parallel worlds really did exist. Even if it was just to confuse Hongjun, there were probably a lot of parallel worlds that were created on their own or by humans. However, whether the ship came from his previous life or from another parallel world, the system had a way to send any living creature through the sea of suffering to that world. It was just that such a privilege would never be available to Lin Yuan. The bartender didn't suspect Lin Yuan at all. With an inexplicable smile on his face, he slowly began to tell him about the location of the Dragon Palace, the underwater prison, and even some of the secrets of the sea and human shipwreck. Because Lin Yuan said that he could accept these things as bargaining chips in the trade, now it seemed that the bartender didn't suspect him. Stop. After talking about more than 300 secrets, Lin Yuan, who had gotten the system's affirmation, stopped the bartender coldly. The bartender's face, which had been smiling all this time, finally showed a hint of genuine joy. The bargaining chip you gave me is enough. I said that the trade is fair, so I won't take advantage of you. Lin Yuan nodded slightly at the bartender and said indifferently, I can open a door that connects the two worlds for you, but it can only be used once. In other words, after you go to that world, it's almost impossible for you to return here. At the same time, in that world, you won't change your species, but you will lose all your power and even the qualification to cultivate. You will have to start all over again. The bartender. What if I increase the price? Hearing Lin Yuan's following conditions, the bartender's face slowly revealed a dignified expression, as if he still didn't suspect Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan shook his head lightly and said indifferently, The rules are like this. If you want to change to another world, you have to start all over again. As for the matter of you not being able to cultivate, it's not the rules. It's that the world you want to go to is most likely the end of the world. It's already extremely difficult to find transcendent creatures, and it's even more difficult to become one of them. Although the gods and Buddhas in that world were dim, there were many legends and biographies since ancient times. There were definitely transcendent creatures, but compared to the monsters in the Tianwu continent, they were definitely not much. The most realistic thing was the existence of spiritual energy, and the amount of spiritual energy in the two worlds was completely different. Although it was just a fragment of the primordial era, the world in his previous life had indeed entered the end of the world. Even the remaining transcendent creatures had learned to tuck their tails between their legs and hide, not daring to appear in the eyes of the world. To put it nicely, it was called, if the saint doesn't die, the thief won't stop. To put it bluntly, if the world was compared to a fruit, be it cultivators or monsters, they were actually all vermin. They devoured spiritual energy to strengthen their bodies, but those who could achieve immortality were few and far between. However, their cultivation would decay when they died, and it wouldn't be reflected back to the world. Therefore, the spiritual energy would become less and less. Relying on the world's natural production, it was far from being comparable to the devouring speed of cultivators and monsters. Therefore, every once in a while there would be an end of the world. Chapter 645. Forget it then. The bartender shook his head, looking like he had lost interest. Although he was curious about this strange world, if the price of satisfying this curiosity was to lose everything he had, then there was no need. Although you have lost interest in going to that world, a deal is a deal. The reward you give me will not be refunded, but you can change it to another wish." Lin Yuan looked directly at the bartender, and there was no emotion brewing in his eyes. The system would not let go of any opportunity to absorb the power of incense, so the moment the bartender agreed to the deal, there was no way to avoid it. Lin Yuan even felt that the system was kind enough to allow the bartender to change his wish. Instead of forcing him to go to the world he wanted to go to in the first place. The bartender touched his chin with his claws, and his golden vertical pupils flashed. He said indifferently, "In that case, tell me, what is the purpose of asking about the location of the Dragon Palace?" This, Lin Yuan's breathing paused slightly, and he looked at the bartender in disbelief, and asked tentatively, "Do you know that after I answer your question, except for the information that is of little value to you, this entire summer world will be absorbed and sacrificed? Are you sure you only want to know this question, and not ask for other rewards?" This freak might really be a lunatic. If it was interested in another world, it would be reasonable to pay a large price, but it chose such a stupid reward when it could not get back its bargaining chip. It was indeed a little out of Lin Yuan's expectations. Logically speaking, 1/3 of the power of incense would be shared between Lin Yuan and the sacrificer, but the bartender's question was equivalent to giving up all the power of incense in exchange for Lin Yuan's answer, and there was no possibility of going back on his word. However, although this freak was crazy, its strength was really unfathomable. If it felt that it was at a disadvantage, it might cause trouble. Even without the suppression of the summer world, Lin Yuan was not sure if he could beat the bartender. However, the bartender's offer was indeed tempting. Those miscellaneous information could also be exchanged for power of incense. After that, the bartender and Lin Yuan would not forget this information, but it was a one-time deal. If the two sides had a second deal, this information could not be extracted from the system at all. And even this time, the amount of power of incense exchanged for these information and secrets was not much. But sacrificing an entire summer world to exchange for power of incense was very tempting. Lin Yuan even suspected that the power of incense that Lei Qiuxing exchanged for the power of the Xinwu dynasty last time might not be comparable to the benefits of this summer world. This was something from another world. Moreover, under the bartender's management, the spiritual energy contained in this summer world had already begun to liquefy. Although the desolate demon realm and void netherworld realm existences could create a summer world as long as they were willing to be ruthless, if they wanted to operate a summer world like the bartender, not only would they need to invest a large amount of resources, but they would also need to invest a very long time. Although the summer world did not have a rating system, this difference still existed. For example, the difference between the Fire Kirin's tomb and this cabin was like the difference between Lin Yuan and an ordinary mountain lord realm, Yao Beast. The bartender looked around the cabin and smiled. "Didn't I say that as long as I think it's suitable? If your answer can satisfy me, then I won't lose out. I ate a strange spiritual object, so my bloodline was purified, turning from a python into a flood dragon. The Dragon Palace of the Four Seas was very interested in my method of purifying my bloodline, so they cooperated with me and invited me to the West Sea Dragon Palace. However, I didn't have 100% trust in the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas, so I couldn't just foolishly come to the Endless Sea without leaving any backup plans. Therefore, I had to hurry to the West Sea Dragon Palace in a short period of time, but I didn't know where the Dragon Palace was. If not for the fact that I was worried that the Yao beasts of the Endless Sea were too strong, I would have released my aura and led the Dragon Palace to the outer sea to receive me. But now, it seems that my luck is not bad. I casually caught a Yao beast from the outer sea and found out about your existence. I also obtained the coordinates of the West Sea Dragon Palace from you." Lin Yuan contemplated for a while and decided to tell the truth. His pair of heterochromatic vertical pupils still didn't show any emotion. The smile on the bartender's face slowly faded. He said with a cold voice, "I have to say that you're very smart. Although I don't know what bargaining chip you're going to use to force the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas, I'm sure that if you didn't prepare anything and stupidly thought that the great beasts of the Dragon Palace wouldn't covet your method, you would be eaten up." Hearing the bartender's words, Lin Yuan's heart sank. An ominous premonition arose in his heart. Although the other party didn't look normal, he had evolved some deformed dragon claws and horns. No matter if it was his power or bloodline, he should be above Lin Yuan's. Before living in the outer sea, this guy should have a high position in the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas. Thus, he should have a full understanding of the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas. If he didn't prepare anything, this trip didn't bode well for him, right? Then, here came the problem. Even if Ao Qian was the descendant of a high-level member of the Dragon Palace of the West Sea, could it really compare to the method of purifying the dragon bloodline? With a successful example like Lin Yuan here, not to mention that Ao Qian was only the descendant of a high-level member of the Dragon Palace, even if she was one of the high-level members of the Dragon Palace, the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas would probably choose to give up Ao Qian for the benefit of the whole clan. Too careless. Lin Yuan's face suddenly darkened. "The deal between you and me is over." The bartender lowered his head again and began to wipe the goblet. He smiled and said, "But this time, you're most likely going to fall out with the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas and even fight. So in a sense, you and I are the same kind. Believe me, if the guys of the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas can't get what they want from you, the undersea prison is your only place to go." Speaking of this, he paused, and the inexplicable smile returned to his face. He said in a deep voice, "Of course, if they get what they want from you, only death awaits you. Because for them, such a secret shouldn't be known by existences other than the direct descendants of the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas." Chapter 646. I don't think they have the guts. The corner of Lin Yuan's mouth cracked, revealing a sinister smile. The dragonization route could indeed purify the dragon clan's bloodline, but this kind of spiritual item could only be produced in the northern frontier. Furthermore, the failure rate was extremely high. After consuming the dragonization route, except for a few lucky ones, almost everyone would turn into a mindless monster. For example, Zhang Xiu was a typical failure. His blood had been changed by Lin Yuan into the curse seal poison. Although it did not affect his bloodline, there was still dragon blood in his body. After consuming the dragonization route, Zhang Xiu still turned into a monster with poison all over his body. His reason was because he was essentially a human. If he was a real dragon bloodline demonic beast, he would have already turned into a crazy monster. When Lin Yuan took the dragonization route, he almost failed. If it weren't for the system's neutralization, Lin Yuan would have gone crazy the moment the dragonization route's medicinal power dissolved, let alone awakening the underworld black water, which was now a strange talent that allowed him to be on equal terms with the system. He was not sure if this thing really had a chance of successfully purifying the Dragon Clan's bloodline, but even if it did, the value would not be higher than 2%. If the dragonization route was wantonly promoted in the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas, Lin Yuan reckoned that the entire Dragon Palace of the Four Seas would go crazy. The rulers of the Endless Sea would directly turn into mindless monsters. Taking a step back, Lin Yuan did not feel that the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas had the ability to bypass him to mine the dragonization route. The Void Netherworld Realm and the Desolate Demon Realm were not allowed to attack weak cultivators. Although this was an unspoken rule, all the cultivators and demonic beasts in the Sky Martial Continent followed it. Perhaps even the true dragons in the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas were one of the people who made this unspoken rule. If the other party was a human, Lin Yuan might have to consider that the other party might break the rules. But if it was a demonic beast, Lin Yuan could ignore this point. Because in the conflict between humans and demonic beasts had always been the weaker party. Don't think that just because the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas was located in the Endless Sea, those humans could not do anything to them. If demonic beasts were really so powerful, the rulers of the Sky Martial Continent would not be humans. Therefore, it was possible for humans to break the unspoken rules, but it was impossible for demonic beasts because they did not have the courage to do so. If this unspoken rule that protected low-level cultivators and demonic beasts was abolished, then the demonic beasts would be the ones to suffer in the end. Even the powerful demonic beasts behind the Hengduan Mountains would not let the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas go, let alone the human cultivators. The tyrannical Lei Qiusheng and the tyrannical Shenwu dynasty from before had all met their end after offending the public. Regardless of whether the otherworldly demons had interfered or not, the Shenwu dynasty was already at the end of its road. This was an indisputable fact. No matter how powerful one's methods and cultivation were, it was impossible to fight against the entire situation by oneself. However, if the top demonic beasts of the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas did not take action and still wanted to interfere with the operations of the northern frontier, or enter the northern frontier to extract the dragonization route under the pretext of imprisoning or killing Lin Yuan, then they would be looking down on the northern frontier faction that Lin Yuan had single-handedly managed. The Southern Expedition, Northern Garrison, Blackwater, and Falling Star armies, the Association of the Fey Emperor, the Embroidered Uniform Guards, and Yi Bus Ho, whether it was internal or external, as long as they did not directly face existences like the Kongming realm or the desolate Fey realm, no matter what they encountered, they had the qualifications to meet force with force. Moreover, the northern frontier had the strength of the entire Hengduan Mountains as a powerful reinforcement. The other 6 empires would not watch as the demonic beasts of the sea occupied the land. This was also a type of general trend. Aoqian was what Lin Yuan relied on to ensure that the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas would not directly turn against him. However, the true reliance was that if Lin Yuan was unwilling to cooperate, even if the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas knew of the existence of the dragonization route, they could only stand on the side and drool. If they dared to reach out, the northern frontier had the ability to cut off their hands. Moreover, Bado had consumed so much Joss flame power. The title of War God of the Northern Frontier was not just for show, was it? Thinking of this, Lin Yuan's aura stabilized slightly. He smiled and said, "I don't think the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas has the guts. I just don't want to directly turn against them, but that doesn't mean I don't have the strength to do so." The cabin had already begun to fade away. A large amount of spiritual energy was being drawn away by some unknown power. The entire Sumeru world was collapsing. Lin Yuan and the bartender looked at each other in this constantly trembling and collapsing Sumeru world, both wearing an inexplicable smile. The Joss flame power on the interface was jumping crazily. Lin Yuan's confidence was also increasing. The bartender nodded with a smile and said, "It's better not to overestimate the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas. They may not have such a long-term vision. Moreover, as the ruler of the Endless Sea for too long, they have forgotten what is called humility and rationality. A big piece of fat meat is placed in front of them. It would be strange if they didn't eat it. You know, greed has never been a monopoly of humans." As his voice fell, the bartender took a step back and his figure faded. He smiled and said, "However, I am looking forward to that day." Lin Yuan did not know what the bartender was looking forward to, but when he came back to his senses, he found that the scene around him had changed. It was still the same cabin as before, but there was no rich spiritual energy. Surrounding him was the terrifying pressure of the seawater. The things inside the cabin had begun to rot. It looked like the cabin had been at the bottom of the sea for hundreds of years. If it were not for the fact that there was no trace of life inside the sunken ship and the Joss flame power on the interface, Lin Yuan would have thought that it was just a dream. Freak. Lin Yuan smiled and shook his head. He separated a strand of divine thought and controlled the body of the puppet to stand up again. Then, he gently patted the beast pouch and put the main body back into the beast pouch. Only then did he adjust his body and swim out of the hole in the cabin. You're out. I've been waiting for you for a long time. As soon as Lin Yuan came out, he saw Finn waving at him from afar. Although the distance between the two was not short, Lin Yuan could clearly see the shock in Finn's eyes. Obviously, the fact that he was able to leave the Sumer world was something that shocked Finn. However, it made sense. After all, the bartender in the Sumer world was a complete lunatic. If Lin Yuan did not have the path of the ancient god and used another method to obtain information, according to the bartender's original train of thought, whether it was drinking or exchanging information, the possibility of him coming out alive in the end was not high. In other words, if he followed the bartender's train of thought, he would end up as a meal on the bartender's plate. From the moment Finn brought him here, he did not think that he would be able to come out alive. Chapter 647. Don't you feel incredible? Lin Yuan's figure flashed, and he directly appeared in front of Finn. His right hand suddenly stretched out, and he directly grabbed the short neck under the fish's head. In front of Lin Yuan, a wisdom state monster didn't even have the slightest possibility of struggling. It could only constantly twist its body, eager to get more oxygen so that it wouldn't be directly strangled by Lin Yuan. Bang! 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 A few muffled sounds echoed. Lin Yuan only felt a push from behind, causing his body to lean forward. Finn took advantage of this opportunity to shake his head and get out of Lin Yuan's control. At the same time, he swung his snake tail and quickly swept to the side. After all, this sea area was still the Barton clan's hunting ground. Although Finn knew that this outsider's strength was unfathomable, he never thought that the other party could contend with the Sea Demon clan in the sea. Although he didn't leave this place because of Lin Yuan's means, Finn called over many hunters of the Barton clan, ready to kill Lin Yuan at any time. It had to be said that Finn's movement speed underwater was very fast. Even Lin Yuan couldn't clearly capture the other party's trajectory, nor could he capture Barton in the first place. After all, the puppet's body was built to imitate the human body. Although it didn't need to breathe and didn't have any extra organs, it didn't have any physiological needs and could move freely in the sea. However, this didn't mean that this puppet's body could compare to those sea monsters in the sea. Being able to move freely in the sea and being able to move freely in the sea were still two different concepts. 17 wisdom state monsters dare to provoke me? Opening the eye of the god, Lin Yuan instantly locked onto the surrounding monsters that were hostile to him. It was just that most of the monsters were only hostile to him. However, including Finn, a total of 17 monsters that looked like Nagas were eyeing him covetously. Moreover, they weren't stupid enough to come up and fight him in close combat. Each of them held something similar to a musket in their hands. The inexplicable thrust just now should have come from this kind of weapon, and its power was not much. Although this level of attack could be ignored on his body, it still had a lot of lethality on the body of the puppet. Through the eye of God, he could clearly see several dents on the puppet's back. One must know that this puppet's body was made of various precious metals and the scales that he had shed before. Even a shape-shifting demon beast like Ning Tianxing could not break his defense. So far, apart from Zhao Xiang's calm disturbance, only the weapons in the hands of these Nagas could cause the puppet's body to deform. This level of damage meant that if these musket-like weapons were to launch a sneak attack on someone, even a Mountain Lord-level Yao beast would be in danger. Ocean demon beasts were indeed not to be underestimated. Not only did they develop their own social class, but even their own technology tree had also made some progress. In this regard, the monsters in the Hengduan mountain range were at least 2 to 3 generations behind the monsters in the ocean. Outsider, I advise you not to be so aggressive. Although I am no match for you, in the ocean, Yao beasts are the kings. Even if your cultivation is not bad and you can move freely in the ocean, you are still no match for us, Finn said coldly. He shook his body and said coldly, I will give you a chance. Leave the Barton clan's territory now, and we can pretend that nothing happened. If you continue to be stubborn, we will kill you in this ocean even if we have to risk our lives. I will also give you a chance. Come and accept your death, or else you won't be the only one to die. Lin Yuan stood in place and looked coldly at Barton. His voice was filled with disdain. The weapons in the opponent's hands were indeed powerful, but it was still a joke if they thought they could threaten the puppet's body. Unless there were hundreds of such muskets, and they could fire 5 to 7 rounds continuously, only then would it be possible to completely destroy the puppet's body. Otherwise, with the puppet's regenerative ability, it wouldn't take long for a few small dents to completely recover. However, Lin Yuan did not believe that the opponent had so many guns. If these guns were ordinary goods, there would definitely be more than 17 Nagas here. Moreover, the opponent's attack frequency would not pause for a moment. In any case, if it were Lin Yuan doing this, he would definitely not stop until the opponent had no strength to fight back. You are courting death. Despicable outsider. Do you know you are? Finn's face darkened and his gloomy gaze fell on Lin Yuan's face. However, before he could finish speaking, a Naga appeared beside him and interrupted him, whispering a few words in his ear. Finn hesitated for a moment, then waved his hand hatefully and roared, "Retreat!" As soon as his voice fell, the 17 Nagas swayed their snake tails and quickly disappeared from the sea. This outsider was too strange. The previous round of salvo was already a very high expenditure for a force like the Barton family. However, it was like reaching out and gently pushing this outsider, not causing much damage at all. Continuing to fight would be meaningless to it. At the very least, none of the methods it could use right now could threaten this outsider. And no matter if it was dispatching the outsider now or luring him to the Barton family's residence, it would be far too dangerous for it. It could only find another opportunity to kill this outsider next time. I've given you a chance. Don't regret it next time we meet. Lin Yuan grinned, revealing 2 rows of white metal teeth. Now was not the time to expose his true body. If it was on land, these Naga monsters would never be able to escape from his hands. However, he could only take the long view. Compared to dealing with these Naga monsters, it was more important to rush to the West Sea Dragon Palace first. His eyes closed slightly, and his divine sense spread out in all directions. Soon, Lin Yuan chose a direction and rushed towards it. The undercurrent under the extremely strong pressure was easily torn apart by him. It was not until Lin Yuan completely disappeared that the bartender, who had changed into a golden robe, walked out of the sunken ship. A pair of golden vertical pupils stared in the direction where Lin Yuan disappeared. There was still an inexplicable smile on his face, the opener of the new era. Interesting. I hope those idiots in the Dragon Palace won't do anything too excessive. Otherwise, it will be difficult for everyone to get out of the embarrassing situation. As soon as he finished speaking, the bartender took a step back and his body exploded. A strong undercurrent appeared in the original area. In the end, everything returned to calm as if nothing had happened. Chapter 648. Half a month later, Lin Yuan stopped in front of a dazzling crystal palace, his dark eyes slightly narrowed. The blood jade corals, which were rarely seen on land, grew like wild weeds in front of this crystal palace. Any one of them could instantly overshadow the treasures of the so-called nobles on land. The crystals that made up the main body of the Crystal Palace were also not simple. Even from tens of thousands of meters away, he could clearly feel the rich spiritual energy flowing in those crystals. Occasionally, when the spiritual energy flowed, the light and shadow it brought along was enough to intoxicate people. The white floor tiles stretched all the way into the Crystal Palace, but Lin Yuan was very clear that they were not jade stones, but spiritual stones. Spiritual energy that had truly materialized was different from the vaporized or liquefied spiritual energy that Lin Yuan had seen before. Spiritual energy that had truly condensed into a substance, and could even be used to hurt people like ordinary brick. Any piece of spiritual energy that was brought to the world on land would attract a large number of human merchants to buy it frantically. It could even directly set off a bloody storm. Even before entering this so-called Dragon Palace of the West Sea, Lin Yuan could already feel what it meant to have a solid foundation from the other side. It was hard to say whether the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas was really as powerful as it was rumored to be, but the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas was definitely richer than the rumors. The periphery of the Dragon Palace was not empty. Pairs of sea demon beasts patrolled back and forth. They were not all snakes, pythons, flood dragons, or dragons, but all kinds of sea creatures that could be seen here. There were even some freaks that were similar to the indescribable creatures in his previous life. However, Lin Yuan could easily feel that these demon beasts contained the bloodline of the Dragon Clan. In fact, Lin Yuan was able to arrive at the Crystal Palace safely because of the flood dragon bloodline in his body. Although these dragon bloodline demon beasts looked different from each other, there was no doubt that as long as they had the bloodline of the Dragon Clan, any kind of creature could stay here without being attacked. It did not even matter if they had any problems. As long as they asked, they would be helped. However, this kind of friendliness was only for dragon bloodline demon beasts. When Lin Yuan first entered the deep sea area, he saw some demon beasts that did not have the bloodline of the Dragon Clan, or sea demon beasts that had not developed intelligence, mistakenly entering the deep sea area. They were instantly attracted to powerful dragon bloodline demon beasts, who directly tore them to pieces without any explanation. Sorry, only the dragon race of the Four Seas can enter the Crystal Palace. A humanoid demon beast with a crab head raised the steel blade in its hand and blocked Lin Yuan's path. Lin Yuan raised his eyebrows imperceptibly, but he sneered in his heart. It seems that the dragon race of the Four Seas and the Dragon Palace are not really close. Just as they reject the outer sea monsters, the dragon race of the Four Seas also rejects these dragon blood monsters, who only have the blood of the dragon race but do not have the identity of the dragon race. The cold hierarchical system is here. For Lin Yuan, who has received an equal education in his previous life, there is an inexplicable urge to vomit. Although he was not a saint, he never believed in fairness. In other words, if two people with different statuses were still at the same starting line, that would be truly unfair. However, not following blindly didn't mean that Lin Yuan could accept everything in front of him, because the so-called Dragon Clan of the Four Seas might not be as powerful as these Dragon Palace species in the outer region. Just because they had the bloodline of the Dragon Clan of the Four Seas, they seemed to be a level higher than all living creatures in the world. For such a cooperative partner, Lin Yuan doubted whether the two sides could have a friendly meeting. I was invited by the West Sea Dragon King. You can call me Black Water Dragon King or the Lord of the Northern Frontier. Lin Yuan's voice was extremely calm, but it instantly attracted the gazes and attention of countless Dragon Palace species. The title Dragon King was a commonplace title for humans. It seemed that any powerful aquatic demon beast could win the title of Dragon King from the mouths of the humans near the water, which indirectly made this title worthless and vulgar. However, that was only for humans. Just like what Ning Tianxing said, when these humans called the powerful aquatic demon beast Dragon King, They never considered the face of the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas and the real Dragon King. However, whether it was because of the unspoken rules or other reasons, the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas would definitely not do anything to those humans who even had to rely on worshipping aquatic demon beasts to survive. However, it didn't mean that they wouldn't take care of those demon beasts called Dragon King. Therefore, the title Dragon King still belonged to the top of the food chain among the real aquatic demon beasts. These demon beasts even had to have the bloodline of the Dragon Clan. Otherwise, they would still be attacked by the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas. Now, an outsider who looked similar to a human was openly calling himself Blackwater Dragon King in front of the Dragon Palace of the West Sea? The Crab General's face sank slightly, as if he was offended. He turned the steel saber in his hand and directly slashed at Lin Yuan's chest. Lin Yuan slid his feet and swam back 30 feet, dodging the steel saber and demon power of the Crab General. Only then did he slowly raise his head and say, "I've experienced the hospitality of the Dragon Palace. Didn't you call yourself Blackwater Dragon King? I'm just trying to see if you have the qualifications to call yourself King." The Crab General took a step forward, his face still gloomy. The steel saber in his hand continued to slash at Lin Yuan. For the Dragon Clan of the Four Seas, Dragon King was the title of supreme ruler. Whether this outsider was invited by the Dragon Palace or not, since he dared to call himself Dragon King in front of the Dragon Palace, he should be prepared to receive the attacks of the Dragon Palace. Dang. This time, Lin Yuan didn't continue to dodge. He very calmly faced the steel saber of the Crab General and used his puppet body to receive the attack, producing a metallic clang. The next moment, Lin Yuan's right hand left an afterimage and grabbed the Crab General's face. He said coldly, "You think you are qualified?" Perhaps he wasn't qualified to call himself Dragon King, at least not with his current strength. However, as the ruler of the northern frontier and the supreme god of the entire northern frontier divine system, Lin Yuan's future achievements might be above those of the few true dragons of the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas. Even now, he was an existence that was on par with the true Dragon King. A dog of the Dragon Palace of the West Sea was qualified to test if he had the qualifications to call himself Dragon King? With regards to the Crab General's actions, Lin Yuan couldn't be bothered to guess. Anyway, he was sure that the Crab General's actions were ordered by the Dragon Palace of the West Sea. After all, the guards of the Dragon Palace weren't positions that just anyone could take up. They didn't need to be very strong because the subordinates of the Dragon Palace and the internal guards of the Dragon Palace could deliver fatal blows to intruders. The guards standing at the main entrance had to be well-informed and eloquent. The meaning of their existence wasn't to guard, but to make the first contact with visitors and determine if they had the qualifications to enter the Crystal Palace. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.